We want to have
Right, so we are live on YouTube. We have Zoom up and running, and the village attorney is on Zoom.
excellent. Where, Alan, where do you where would you prefer to be during all this?
I assume that you're gonna do some stuff first,
Yep.
and after you have speakers, I'll get back.
Okay.
Okay, Chris is gonna maintain. So I can just facilitate.
Has the microphone been charged? Or do we have new batteries? That would be.
Put in new batteries twice this week, so hopefully this one will last.
Fingers crossed. Okay, so then without further ado, we will go ahead and call to order our workshop for this evening. Today's Thursday, January 15th, 2024. And we are here for our workshop with Alan Cohen to work us through the CIP project list along with the information that was put together by our manager. So I see, do we have any, we have our village attorney on Zoom. Do we have any other participants by Zoom, Chris?
We do have a couple, yes.
So we have some folks here in attendance this evening. So I don't know if this is something that the commission would like to weigh on. This is a workshop, so we're not voting on anything this evening, but I know there are some folks here that expressed a desire to make some comment before we get started. I have no problem opening up the floor to the people that are here that would like to comment, but it will be subject to our normal public comment rules. There's any other positions on that, or if anyone has any other opinions, we'll just go ahead and get started.
We should always allow people to comment.
That's why we're starting with that. So we'll go ahead and we'll start it with here in our log cabin. If you would please come up to the mic, give us your name and address, and remember, please, that the public comment is limited to 3 minutes, and anyone can get started for us.
Good evening, David Raymond, 11520 Northeast 9th Avenue. So just for 1 second on Jonathan's point, because I emailed Jonathan and the commission about an hour ago, because the agenda that went out said that you all are going to decide on whether there will be public comment. One commissioner responded that it wasn't a workshop, and another responded that there were special circumstances and we're paying the consultant. So I just want to put on the record, the Sunshine Law is very clear on public meetings. Unless you guys are in some kind of arbitration with the union or something, public comment is not something you vote on. I really would like it, not during my time, but at some time, for the village attorney to weigh in on that, because I'm working in government my whole life, and most of it here, I just don't even understand how that's on an agenda. The agenda itself, the reason I'm kind of frustrated by this, the agenda doesn't really say anything either. So the few people that are here because we know about it from Nextdoor and from Mac posting things to let us know about the meetings. Prior to this, and when you did this workshop, I bring it up now because it's not just that everything isn't going out, because it's not, and residents are not finding out about meetings unless you're on Nextdoor. We used to. And when Alan, who's back here, wanted all of our input, you all emailed the hell out of us. We got emails every day. Please send in your survey, participate. But now at the end, when you're going to decide, you're going to vote on whether we get to speak. It's really disrespectful to the residents, and I'm upset by it. And I'm just letting you know, I think it's a very unfair position to put us in, and I think it may be an illegal one. So in terms of the plan itself and the priorities, I'm not quite sure what you're going to do. But when you look at the surveys, and the surveys are what people wrote in, they're not things that people got a choice, multiple choice on. There seems to be a debate online, at least, between pickleball and safety on our streets. I don't know what one has to do with the other, really. And this is a capital budget. I'm not saying that I'm for or against pickleball. Get a bid, see what it is, but also see if we could use the basketball court for pickleball during the day. There's nobody on it. We live 2 houses from the park. Nobody's there all day long in the weekdays. You had 32 people respond for pickleball courts. You had 143 people asking for road repairs. $18 million was an estimate. Not sure where you got that. But what is budgeted this year in whatever you're looking at tonight? For 143 surveys, the most surveys, $30,000. 90,000 is budgeted for pickleball court, by the way. 65 people said we want more trees. There's not $1 to put in a tree. It's the first year, I think, since I've been here that there wasn't any money to plant a tree, which
And that's time.
is horrible. Okay, there's more, but thank you.
Thank you.
Janie Anderson, 11905 Northeast 11th Place. First off, having lived here since dinosaurs roamed the earth, I can tell you, whatever the meeting was called, whether it was a workshop or a whatever, it was never a question. There was always public comments. Our first village manager tried to stop that during workshops. The then commission stopped that real quickly. So there is a long tradition. Anyway, on a happier note, I really want to take this opportunity to thank this commission, as well as our police force, who hopefully are on Zoom or somewhere. At least we're getting started on a master traffic plan. I so appreciate that. There were a lot of interesting things that were brought up, but one of them, and I've talked to a couple of you about this, I am very much against. With all the things you could spend money on that would be highly productive, I don't think spending any money to put those signs, don't think about speeding signs back up, is at all a wise use of money. I mean, there's kind of a psychological attachment that somehow that gives us an image and people will pay attention. They don't pay attention to stop signs and speed limit signs. The reaction you will more likely get is laughter. I can tell you, having lived here when those signs were a huge deal, the world was also very different. Fewer people lived in the area, meant fewer people were coming through. There was probably a tendency to follow the rules a little more than you see now. I mean, at the very least, the speed trailers have these big flashing lights in your face. Now, something I saw interesting in Hilton Head, on one of the roads, they have, and I'm gonna have to come out from the mic a minute, they have signs that are about this high in multiple places, so that you're not just seeing one speed table or trailer, whichever they're called, you're seeing this multiple times, and it comes on with a happy face if you're like, okay, and not so happy if you aren't. That's kind of just another idea, but I just think there are infinitely more productive ways of spending money than on more passive road signs. Thanks.
Thank you.
Barbara Kuehl, 777 Northeast 111th Street. I agree 100% with what David just said. You all know me. You get emails from me all the time. The communication on this was really bad. I haven't been that active because of personal issues this year. So I didn't attend the workshops, but now this is supposedly the end of the workshop and you're coming to some conclusions, and you had to really look for this to even know what was going on. And the agenda was ridiculous. It wasn't even an agenda. It was decide on if we should let people speak. That was it. The information from this survey, you had to really be tenacious to go to read what was put out. To all the different categories. The summary, I went back and found the strategic plan. There was some place that I found an overview. That should have been here tonight. When you have an agenda, this should have been presented so residents could see an overview. What were the results? You're going to look through 3,000 categories, but like David, because David always looks at information and gets to the bottom of it, things I've been screaming about for 10, 15 years, roads. I've lived here. I've lived in my house for over 40 years. The roads were never done on my street. The mayor lives on my road. When I used to ride my bike, my mirror used to fall down from the bumps on that road. And like David said, just about nothing is in the budget. Flooding, a lot of money for flooding. I've also lived here and have seen a couple of corners with some, and I'll use the word flooding carefully, because in my house, 20 minutes later, the water's gone. But yet all this money is being allocated for this big flooding problem. The items that people did respond to, plant more trees, about 18%. Median, swales, green space, 30% wanted it. Traffic mitigation, 15. Roads, 40%. Pickleball, a whopping 9%. And all of a sudden, we have the money for pickleball courts. Just one quick thing. Go online. The only pickleball around us is in North Miami. They're only open 3 days a week in the mornings, which means anybody who wants to play pickleball now can come to Biscayne Park. I have no problem with people coming and using our park. I used to go to North Miami when my kids were little because we didn't have the facilities. But what are we doing with the pickleball court that 9% of the people think are so important? Okay,
And that's
thank
done.
you.
Thank you.
Anna Tassino, 779 Northeast 119th Street. Shortly, I oppose that pickleball. I think it is almost useless. I wonder whose idea was it. I rather have improvement of the media. I would leave the street as is so people don't speed. To be honest, 119th west of 6th Avenue is a disaster. I don't know how they have that accident, but that's a way to people to go slow. It forces me to drive slowly. So I'd rather keep care of our media. In front of my house is a disaster. It's a humongous tree. The southern part is taken care of by FPL. My side, every storm, every rain, there are branches on the street and on my grass. So the media, horrible. More police, that's what I would like. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Tiffany Hill, 660 Northeast 119th Street. So first, I want to say I think we need to do a better job at communication of the different meetings going on. Just listening to people talk and giving their opinions, this is how I'm learning of what's going on. And it's a shame because the residents shouldn't have to go digging to find information online and wherever to know what's going on in your own community. You know, there are certain points like when something's important for the commission or the city or city hall, they'll blast out 100 emails to get the response they want. But other things where we should be involving our residents, getting their opinions, their feedback, we're not doing enough communication to get their insights, to involve them in these meetings. I only hear it from people when they speak, and then in different group chats of people communicating about what's going on. That's how I know what's going on in the community, which it is very sad. And I do like her point of the natural speed bumps, since maybe we can't put them in. So maybe that's a great point to have natural speed humps. I do agree with the pickleball court. I mean, I would love to have extra amenities in our community, but we should put that money useful in another way where residents can benefit from it more. We can use a nice big shade over our kids' playground. The tot lot has shade, but the bigger playground doesn't have shade. Maybe more shaded seating areas. Maybe a fenced-in dog area. Everyone here has dogs. Let's come up with other ways to use that money that'll really go to more of a use rather than pickleball, which maybe, what do we have? A couple pickleball players. We have a beautiful beach volleyball court. You know, I see a handful of people use those during the week, but we really need to use that money to go towards other things. Renovating the rec center. Everyone uses that every day. You know what I mean? Let's make it nicer, cleaner, better furniture, better kitchen. So let's just come up with that and just please communicate more and involve your residents more, please.
Thank you.
Amy Raymond, 11520 Northeast 9th Avenue. Well, I think that the speeders are really still speeding, but I'm seeing more police around. Somebody stopped me the other night at the rec center and said, "Hey, I've got my lights off." I don't know how he knew me. My picture's probably up in the police. He's like, I was like, "How do you know me?" It's like, I've got my lights off and I'm ready to catch somebody. He wasn't on a good street, but he had great intentions. This morning, I said to somebody that they were speeding like crazy up 9th and going to 125th Street. And, they were slowing down as soon as they saw that cop with his lights on the court. And I said, "Oh, thanks for calming down the speeders." And he said, "Well, I'd really like to catch them." And but how can you catch them if you have your lights on there? But anyway, they're trying. I appreciate it. And I'm going to go through the deputy chief and the chief, just keep that up. But when it comes to communication, this is what I don't understand. Because the last manager, I'm not saying anything about, the new administration, but what happened? Because the last manager he updated the website. He was communicating constantly. I mean, to me, for a leader, there's three things: communication, knowledge. And if you don't have knowledge, gain knowledge, that's fine. And the third thing is caring about the people who you're leading. So that's how I'm feeling, like nobody's caring about me. And I'm a little self-centered. Yes, I get afraid. I want notification. Because now I know a lot of stuff's happening. The Russians are putting a nuclear, stuff up there. And I want to know what's happening about everything. So I trust my manager and my administration to let me know what's happening. And I want communication. So, I don't understand what happened. The website was perfect. I don't know why it's not working anymore. You go to the calendar, you try to go to the agenda and it doesn't work. The Zoom's not coming on. We're not getting notices about commission meetings. And I don't understand why. So anyway, I'm hoping that'll improve because that'll make me feel safer and everybody around me feel safer when you get communication. And I just want to thank you all, for doing what you do, because I don't think I could do it. I know I couldn't do it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan Huntington, 744 Northeast 119th Street. I want to talk about the document you guys will be working on tonight to prioritize our capital improvement funds. This document comprises data from a survey sent out from you, the commission, to us, the residents. This was the agreed upon metric at which you would prioritize our funds. I want to talk about some specific projects on that document and the funds that are allocated for that project. Dog park, $0 currently funded. Traffic mitigation, 56 residents voted for it, $0 currently funded, $0 were proposed. Median improvements, 101 residents for, 0 currently funded, only $10,000 proposed. Pedestrian amenities, 83 residents for, $0 currently proposed, $0 currently funded, and not expected to be funded until the year 2027. These projects have been advocated for years. For years, they've been falling on deaf ears, told we don't have the budget for them. Pickleball, 32 residents voted for it. That is 1% of our village population. $90,000, and it was fully funded in the first year. Why can pickleball not wait while these other projects have been waiting patiently? Grants coming in the future do not protect my children now. This money is here now and can be used to improve our village for all now. Safety is comprised only $6,000 of a $600,000 plus budget. That is less than 1%. If this budget is passed the way it is, it'll show me and us, the residents, that this commission is committed to 1% safety and 100% pickleball. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no others in the log cabin. We'll go ahead and turn to our Zoom. We have a few hands up here.
First person on Zoom is just iPad. You'll have to unmute.
Hi, it's Howard Goldman from 11950 Northeast Sixth Avenue. First, I'd like to just clarify on a couple of points that were made earlier. It's not one pickleball court that we were speaking of. It was two pickleball courts. I think somebody had commented on next door about $90,000 for a pickleball court. That was an incorrect statement. It's two pickleball courts, no lights. Parking would not be affected in the evening time, as it would only be for daytime play. Pickleball has become a very big sport worldwide as well as nationwide. The comment that was made about there's only one pickleball in the area of North Miami was another incorrect statement. Several pickleball courts have sprung up within a 10-mile radius. Just to name a few: Miami Shores, Miami Beach, the golf course, Hullover. They've got additional courts being built. They started with 4. They got another 4 being built right now. So it's constantly growing. And for what reason? For community togetherness and health and fitness. We have nothing in Biscayne Park that advocates that within the park. Certainly, it's a wonderful park to walk around, to walk your dog around, and you can't bring your dog inside the park, but only on the exterior of the park. When I first moved into the park in 2005, I tried getting a lot of people together and on board with a dog park. It failed miserably. I've watched several items come up and get built and built and built, and then the can gets kicked, and they all die because finally, when something is about ready to pass, people start screaming that, oh, there was money available. Let's pass that on to something else. Why don't we just focus on one thing? And as I said on next door, I will be the first one that will help to advocate for the safety and building up of our streets, safety and speeding. Whatever we need to do, I'm all for it. But this has gone so far, we can actually get something passed in Biscayne Park, which would be the first thing that I've seen potentially passed since I moved in here in 2005. Mark my words, you new residents, this is a problem. And I hope that we can all come together as residents and show the commission that we support what they've worked hard for us for over the last year. And we'll all be able to come together and continue to grow and build upon this and make Biscayne Park, as I envisioned it a long time ago, with the future of a dog park, with the future of building up the playground, with the future of making our streets safer, whether it be speed bumps or more police on it. And the police have done a phenomenal job. I got to give them a lot of credit because they've been on top of everything on that. And that's really all I got to say. I hope you all can be with me on this. Thank you.
Next on Zoom is Judy.
Hi. I just want to say that when we're thinking about budget, the most important to me, and should be anybody that lives on 119th Street, is the fact that there is not one sign that says 25 miles per hour, if that is indeed the speed limit. And I also want to make a correction, because the police report, the PowerPoint that was shown last week that said that there was a damaged tree on the incident that happened. Let me tell you, my car was totaled. My carport, my driveway, I have estimates of over $40,000 for that. Not to mention the trauma of seeing 3 people that are now deceased. I really think that the budget should go towards, let's put some signs up, because how do people know? Because 119th has become a cut through from North Miami. Tuesday night, another accident on 119th and 6th. People are using it as a cut through, and they're speeding. How do they know that it's 25 miles per hour? If it is, if I'm correct, how do they even know that if there isn't a sign? All down Griffin, there are 25-mile-per-hour signs. And I really feel that the budget needs to first consider the safety of the residents here, because this was a traumatic incident that happened and could have been much more tragic if somebody had been walking their dog, as they do down my street, or a baby in a carriage. And I have to tell you, when you're thinking about spending money, we need more police presence, especially on 119th. 121st isn't a cut through because there is the right only sign on 6th Avenue. 119th Street is a straight shot wherever you want to go from North Miami. And people are using it, and it's people that don't live here and they don't know what the speed limit is. So I am begging you to please consider spending part of the money on signs that say 25 miles per hour and more police presence, please, because this is something that has affected my life that I will never forget. And I didn't go into it in the last meeting, but when I saw that the police report said a damaged tree, I was insulted because I'm picking up the aftermath of everything that happened here at my house. So I would appreciate it if you would consider, please, putting some money into signage in Biscayne Park, 25 miles per hour.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob?
Yes, what I think, really believe we need to be looking at a data collecting speed trailer. I've been mentioning this numerous times. By having a data collecting speed trailer, you will also know the speeds of each car, the average speed, the number of cars going down the road, besides having a sign showing how fast the car is going. This way, the police can go ahead and use that data to know, as they move the trailer around, what areas really need to have an extra amount of officers out there for speeding cars, and at what time it is happening. I think it has saved resources of our police department by knowing where to be at the right times. Also, I used to get emails from the city from time to time of upcoming things. It just seemed like that has dried up recently in the last few months. An example is this meeting. There should be data, information going out to the public, letting them know about these meetings and each meeting. And, we were asked to go ahead and sign up for these emails from the city, but they seem to have vanished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura?
Hi, Laura Graves, Griffin Boulevard. So I have two topics. One is the pickleball courts. I play pickleball in Miami Shores regularly, several times a week. And I said this in the last meeting that I zoomed in on. I actually pay to play. And I would love to be able to have the opportunity to play in Biscayne Park, and I'd be happy to pay to play in Biscayne Park. Like Howard said, it brings communities together. I've lived and owned here for 26 years, and I have never been able to really utilize anything in the park. It's always being used by outside entities, which is fine, but I think I should also have the rights to be able to utilize my park. The second topic is, if we're looking for some potential revenue streams for the community, why don't we look at electronic charging stations for electronic vehicles as a potential source of
Oh
revenue?
my God.
Good thinking. If you could continue, Ms. Graves.
I'm finished. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Next up would be Howard.
Hi there, this is actually Liz Goldman. I know it says Howard, it's because I'm on his computer. I live in 119th Street and 6th Avenue. I've lived here as a resident for 14 years. And I would just like to say that I am for the pickleball courts. I don't think there's been any money spent on recreation for adults in the park for years. And I think pickleball is a great opportunity to bring the community together and for families to have an outlet. You know, we have a great kids facility over there, but nothing for the parents or the adults. So, you know, $90,000 I thought was a small percentage of the budget. I think there needs to be some clarity around that. You know, traffic also is a big problem, but I think that it's a huge problem and we need a lot of dollars committed to that. And there's always the conversation that we never have enough, but that shouldn't mean that we can't do anything else. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is it for Zoom.
Thank you to everyone who here in the cabin and on Zoom that provided some additional public comment for us. Since we aren't in a normal structure, I will still open it up to see if there's anyone that wants to provide any reply or context or anything with respect to any of the comments that we've received before we ask Alan to introduce the workshop for us. Okay.
I'd like to say a couple things if I can. Am I not close enough?
There you go.
Okay.
Sure.
Can I have a couple minutes?
Yeah, of course.
Great. Didn't get a chance to speak much at the last meeting. We were very tight on time. There was a lot of public comments. You know, I think I know everyone in this room somehow. I used to work with her husband at the Herald. I mean, that, yeah, newspaper. You probably don't know what that is. Okay. But my name is John Holland. I also live on 119th, like seemingly half the people showed up. I was obviously flattered when Mac reached out to me. Ironically, I had met the mayor serendipitously the day before, and it just seemed like a good thing to do. So really quick, just want to add a couple of things that I didn't get to say last week. One is obviously I'm very concerned about traffic situation. I hear you guys. I'm on one. That car got through 6. Who the hell knows where it would have ended up, right? You know, so it could have been me. But I get it. But I think that my value prop for being on this commission is hopefully going to start to come into play tonight, which is that I have an extensive background, corporate and capital planning, financial planning, and not personal finance, corporate planning and things like that. And one thought that keeps coming to my mind is, you know, we're talking about a capital improvement plan. I assume that means that we have a fixed assets ledger and that these are things that are being amortized over time. So at some point, I would love to get a better understanding of what's on that ledger, what debt we're servicing now, and what we feel our capacity for debt is, because that'll help me as my former life as a fixed assets manager for a newspaper, would help me figure out, okay, what do we have here? Like, what is our real budget? I really don't feel like I know. The PDF Excel sheet doesn't really seem to make that clear unless I'm missing it. Also, I would love to get a copy of that in Excel. I think it's easier to manipulate, to read through and all that jazz. So I don't know who can provide that, but I'd love to get an Excel version of that, even if it's like a soft copy that I get to play with. It doesn't have to be a shared copy. And the point of mentioning all that is because I really feel like there's a lot of people saying it's got to be this or that. You know, this. Well, I don't know if that's true yet because I don't know what our capacity is. I don't know what's going on in the operating ledger versus the fixed assets ledger from the sheet. I'm assuming that'll become clear as we go forward. But I think before we start pitting ourselves against each other with it's got to be this or it's got to be that, I think we should all understand what that limit is. And then from there, obviously, we have to make, I'm not saying it'll be easy, obviously, but, you know, I think that that's clarity that I need to have that. What is our capacity to add on things to our ledger that we can amortize? And that'll help us, obviously, prioritize.
Maybe that is a good segue to have Alan and our manager introduce the list that we have in front of us, the Excel sheet they have, the data, where it came from, what the process is. And I don't want to overlook our village attorney who is also on if he wants to provide any additional context with respect to the workshop format for this evening and the discussion that we're having. And I absolutely no disrespect to what anyone has said, but we aren't passing a budget necessarily this evening. We're not voting on anything. So that's not the purpose. I don't want to mischaracterize what the purpose is, so I would love to hear from the folks that set this up for us, because I don't want to put words in their mouth. So Alan, if you wouldn't mind just introducing this for us and kind of give us the benefit of your background in the process here, please.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. And good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Cohen. I'm the consultant that the village hired to facilitate this process after having put together your strategic plan, at least the first phase of the strategic plan. Commissioner Holland, I don't know how much you know about me or you, so I'll briefly tell you that I'm a former city manager. I'm a former city mayor. I'm a former assistant county administrator. I'm also a former business owner of 2 or 3 different businesses, actually. So I come, and also an avid community volunteer, by the way. So I come at this exercise wearing many different hats and sharing many different perspectives in whatever you want to call this up here. All right, but and there's value in bringing in an outside person sometime because they're neutral, presumably so, and I can assure you I am. And my intent in coming in is to do the best job that I can for you with the limited resources that you have. So the strategic plan, as we put it together, was an opportunity for this community, everyone here and everyone out there, to express the priorities that they had for the community moving forward. And we were delighted by how many comments that we received. We exceeded statistical, milestones and whatnot, and we got really good feedback. And to the gentleman's point, we got some clear ideas on what community priorities are. And that was the purpose of the exercise. The purpose of this exercise now, and why you elect these people here in front of you, is they have to balance the priorities that you have with the actual capability or capacity of your community, your financial capability, your organizational capability. How many staff you have that can take on additional things, how much money you have to fund additional projects or fund additional staff, or whatever it might be. In this case, we're focused on a capital plan. So we're not talking about additional staff, we're talking about actual projects. I'd like to walk you through some of the assumptions that went into the document that you saw before you. And after that, I'm going to ask the manager to make a comment on one of the items that was spoken about a lot, and actually a second item that just came up from the commissioner. So the assumptions as we look at this is when the commission finally votes on this, you'll be voting on a long-term plan, but you're really only locking in the expenditures for this fiscal year. Next fiscal year's expenditures won't be locked in until you do fiscal year 25's budget. But what you'll now have is an additional tool to help guide you that balances the community priorities with your capacity analysis. Annual CIP, capital improvement plan, annual CIP funding is projected in this at $400,000 a year. That's all the village can afford, considering everything else that the village has on its plate. And the biggest chunk of your money goes to what you'd want it to, your police department, by far. That is the #1 expenditure in your budget. We put in a 5% contingency into the plan to account for unexpected increases in costs. Beginning in fiscal year 25, half of the $400,000 or $200,000 is allocated for in this plan for road improvement, because that was one of the if not the biggest priority that came out of community sentiment or the community priorities. Okay. Some road repair and replacement should be able to be accomplished during sewer installation. So we know that this is also another high priority of the community, and it's something that is likely to be imposed on the community at a later date by either the county or the state. And that's going to involve tearing up roads. Why fix a road when you know you're going to tear it up? Now, there are roads that we know are not going to necessarily get torn up by sewer, and those could be targeted. And, you know, the manager and I spent a good amount of time talking about a lot of different strategies, and that was one of them. So there are places where you can start and not worrying about it's going to get torn up again. And we can show that to you later if you're so inclined. There's 3 pieces of equipment in here, 2 generators and a wood chipper. And we assumed that those would be leased to own rather than an outright buy, because that spreads out the cost over several years, and it allows you to also fund other priorities during those ensuing years. We assumed, I'm very conservative in my numbers, and I assumed a 20% increase, total increase in the budget for that equipment. The actual interest cost these days in capital equipment is anywhere from 4 to 16%. So it, you know, like I said, I was very conservative. So if you're wondering where those final numbers came from. The traffic infrastructure. One of the reasons why you don't see a lot with traffic infrastructure upfront in this plan is because the village has been fortunate enough to garner a federal grant to do a comprehensive traffic study looking at all aspects of traffic for the village. Federal funding comes with a lot of strings with it, but the positive side is once you have that traffic study done, you will be much better positioned to get additional grant funds to do the actual capital work that needs to be done. Work on improving the roads, improving signage, looking at access issues, looking at speed, mitigation measures, whatever you end up deciding what to do. But that is specifically, that's one of the assumptions in here, is that we have to give time for that traffic study to be done. It doesn't happen overnight because federally funded projects do take a little longer process-wise. And I know that from experience. But you'll see, Chris, I believe we assume that it would be done by the end of 25, which is why in 26, you start seeing a number of different lines related to traffic infrastructure being funded. Okay, so that explains the particular delay there. Grant estimates assume 100% funding, no local share except for roads. And that's because we've already told you we're putting in some local money for roads. That is an optimistic assumption, because there are many grants out there at the state and federal level that required some local share. Okay, so, but sometimes you can use a state grant to count as local share for the federal, you know, and you can be creative. But we want to be clear up front about those grant assumptions that we have here later on. Okay, because there are some big numbers there, but the only way you're ever going to get some of these projects done is with grants, because you simply don't have the financial capacity otherwise. And the sewer project is probably, between sewer and the road replacement, those are your 2 big, your big nuts to cover. Design and engineering is assumed to make up 20% of project costs. And so practically every number that's in here, except for the equipment and some odds and ends, it includes 20% for design or 20% for planning. And that's, we again just wanted to be clear on that. And another thing on grants are assumed to be available, not guaranteed. Chris and I are both aware of a variety of grant funding availability, but that changes over time. Like right now, there's great money out there for infrastructure that, because of the federal law, we don't know how long that money is going to last. And the sooner we're in a position to apply for it, the better. So Chris, first, the commissioner raised a question about debt, which I think I can answer, but I think it's more appropriate that you do.
Yeah, we currently have no bonds, so there is no debt service that we're paying.
Okay.
The last debt service payment, I believe, was 2020.
Is there a reason for that? Was that just a commission decision to not carry any debt? at all? Just, or is that, okay, let me rephrase it. Is that normal for a municipality of this size with this type of revenue stream?
The short answer is it depends. There was not a considerable, there was a significant amount of debt and debt service incurred. I believe it was after some of the storms. So I'm not sure. My history only goes back until August. I can't speak to what the commission was thinking back in 2018, 19, 20.
Commissioner, it's really a local philosophical decision. I know, for example, Lauderdale by the Sea has no debt, and that's philosophical. They don't want to take on any debt. So they just try and fund everything with grants, and they're even better off than you guys are because they're right on the ocean as far as property valuations. But it's a locality by locality decision. But I wanted you to be clear that that 400,000 was a fairly hard number based on the current structure of your budget and wasn't going to vary because bonds would be paid off in the future.
Yeah, I think I was misled because I don't have a memorization of the budget yet. I tend to learn these things over time as I look at spreadsheets all the time at work. Eventually I just, but I've only looked at it 2 or 3 times in a couple weeks, but also because of the word capital. And I'm in the world where when you say capital, you're talking about things that have a useful life of more than 3 years, that you can amortize, blah, blah, blah. So we are talking about really an operating budget.
No, I'm going to jump in on that. We are talking capital. So, capital from the perspective of roads, for example. Your explanation, less amortization. We'll be paying cash essentially as we sit right now looking at this. As we get down or as we get through the capital improvement plan, some of the things such as road repair, septic to sewer, some of the larger projects, we can certainly look at amortization. We can look at bonding opportunities. But as for the purposes of tonight, this is all set up strictly cash.
Jonathan, may I say something to Brad? Sure. One thing that we have not talked about when it comes to funding is raising private money as well. So we do have the ability to raise money to pay for some projects. It's not something we've done as long as I've lived here, unless it was for some very small kind of things. But I want that to be part of the conversation because I'll just use pickleball as an example. It's like, pickleball money could come from a number of places and we could raise money. We have a foundation that can raise money for us. We have them doing some other things and they've never really worked at the direction of the commission since I've been a commissioner. We've never asked them to do any specific thing. But we do have the ability to raise money on our own as a village from private corporations and wherever we can get money. So we do have that ability as well. So we talk about where money comes from. That's not a bucket that we're dipping into at all. And there might be opportunities in here for the commission to make the decision that we will go after money elsewhere to try to get something done. There are companies who will sponsor things and naming rights and all kinds of possibilities, just throwing things out there. But let's not forget that we do have the ability to go get money on our own.
It's a good point. And to tack onto that and to also follow up on a point that Alan raised. I remember when we were talking about this workshop, I think the first time we were here, I mentioned that I would provide what Alan and Chris gave to us to David Caserta, and our lobbyist. And I had the benefit of speaking with him just the other day. He had a chance to go through everything that was provided. It was a brief conversation. Regrettably, he was unavailable to be here with us this evening, but I asked him in summation at the end, is it fair to say that your representation, David, to the commission is to prioritize water projects? Because the funding is more available right now and they're more favorably looked upon. So that was really the benefit of his advice. It didn't really go much more beyond that. But to your point, Mac, he said, if you partner with other local municipalities, that's another good way to go after money. And that you say, look, if we're looking at like the Tri-Village area, for example, we're partnering with El Portal and Miami Shores on septic and sewer, just for sake of argument. You know, it's more, it looks better to fund that for a larger impact than just Biscayne Park. So something also to think about. But he made a good point on that. So Alan, I didn't know if you were finished or if you
No,
wanted to
no,
continue.
one other thing, and then, again, I want, Chris to comment on this. You'll see on your spreadsheet, and there's a key in the upper left-hand corner, there are several lines that are in yellow, and one of them, and yellow means in progress. Okay, one of those is the, item that was discussed a lot tonight about, pickleball. And Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
So just a little bit of background on this. Typically what happens in a capital improvement plan is a municipality plans out all their future projects, everything from structural infrastructure, if there are major data, telecom, things like that, plan it all out. In the budget, they assign money to the capital fund. And then this capital improvement plan is what decides how we're going to use the money in that fund. This is the first year we've had a real solid capital improvement plan. It's a little bit of a transition. There were several projects enumerated in the budget, meaning when the commission set the budget, they said specifically, we want these funds to go to these projects. And then on top of those projects, they put $350,000 into the capital improvement fund to be used as this capital improvement plan specifies. So those projects were the vulnerability study, log cabin ADA improvements, log cabin ADA walkway, recreational improvements / pickleball, and parking lot. So you'll notice on the actual capital improvement plan, as Alan mentioned, the pickleball tennis court upgrade is in yellow. That's in progress. That shows that we have $90,000 set aside. In progress for this particular project means we move forward as a village with obtaining the request for proposals, request for bids, and then the way any of these projects work. Once we get those bids, we bring them back to the commission, open the bids, identify who the lowest bidder is, and then at that point, the commission votes whether or not to accept the bid and move forward or to not do anything. So in progress doesn't necessarily mean we're definitely doing exactly what this says right now. In progress could mean that we are simply getting bids. So just something to keep in the back of your minds. The other thing to keep in mind is even though we do have projects enumerated in the budget, and perhaps our attorney can just double check me on this, the commission can choose to use those funds in a different way. So even though we have $20,000 for the log cabin ADA walkway, the commission could vote to decide we're going to move that over to something different, water fountains or something along those lines.
Unless it's grant funded.
Correct. If it's grant funded, it's a whole different animal. The other reason that the capital improvement plan is a little bit funky is because we do have some funds that were allocated for projects in fiscal 23. We have some funds that were budgeted for fiscal 24, and now we're talking about additional things that we may add to fiscal 24. And on top of that, there's some potential grant funding available in fiscal 24 and some grant funding that has already been awarded for fiscal 24. So it's a little bit of a mess for some of these projects in fiscal 24. As we move forward, the plan and the proper use of a capital improvement plan is for the commission to identify which projects we want to take in which order. And then it becomes my job, along with the grant writers and along with our lobbyist, to identify the funding sources that we have available to us. A lot of the grants, for example, won't even take our application until we have a capital improvement plan showing when we're planning on attacking these things, what comes first, what comes after, so they can decide whether or not to give us those grant funds.
So
I'm sorry, may I ask a quick follow-up question, Chris? Back to the pickleball, you put an RFP out. Can you update everybody on that?
That closes this month, I believe next week. And then we will have the bids to open.
Are you allowed to reveal if you got anything back or how many you got back? Or I don't know if you're allowed to say that at this point.
In my experience, I can't. Back in Wisconsin, I can't tell you what we currently have.
Or if you even have any at all.
Yeah, the cone of silence is what the clerk is
Okay.
saying.
That's-
We can't interfere in that process.
You can't do that here either. Can't do that in Florida. You can't discuss
Okay.
it. So
Okay.
time to open the bids.
And it
So-
closes, I'm sorry, it closes when?
I believe it closes in 1 week, so the 22nd.
22nd.
So,
Okay.
so let me offer a summary of what I heard Chris say and what we talked about before. There was expressed interest in looking at some upgrades to recreational facilities, including the possible addition of a combined tennis court, pickleball court. Chris moved forward to get some information to bring to you, at which point you would have to make a hard decision whether or not you want to move forward with the project. So in progress doesn't mean that you've committed to funding it. And you can decide tonight or another night that you want to change direction and reallocate those monies however you see fit. Okay? So I just wanted everyone here and everyone listening to understand why those monies are there.
I think it's also worth just mentioning for some folks to be reminded, some of the things that people said, I'd rather have this than that. Some of those things are funded in our regular budget. So if you look, this is a separate part of the budget and things are specifically delineated in here, but we have the full budget where other things are funded for as well. So some of the things that I heard people saying they wish we had are funded in the budget and are underway already. Just as a reminder, this is not the extent of the money we would spend to get all these things done.
By the way, there are a couple of numbers on the sheet that I wanted to clarify because one of your speakers did comment on one of them. There was a mention that 101 responses came out in favor of improvements for the medians. We actually had about between 50 to 60 some odd responses in that regard. But we also had close to the same amount for green spaces, plantings, and improvements. They all seem to fit together, so I combined those two categories. So we didn't have 101 people come out specifically just on medians. We did have a good number nonetheless. I can't remember who said it. Was it you? No? Okay, all right, but just to clarify, that particular number, I think all the rest of the numbers are unique and identifiable from the survey as you know it. Okay. So at this point, you have a draft capital improvement plan in front of you. For this year, 330,000 of that is allocated with 20,000 set aside as a contingency for unexpected expenditures. And that's, I would say to you, that's where you'd want to focus, but not exclusively, because of course there's a tie-in between this year and subsequent years. If there's a particular project that's not in this year that you still want to get started, okay? What I want to point out is that everything is interrelated. So you could easily defund one project and move all that funding to another line. For example, you could take the 90,000 pickleball and put all that into streets. That's easy, okay? But if you want to take that pickleball money and move forward something else, that's going to have a domino effect on everything else. It's not anything that we can't handle. It's just, you got to give us a minute to figure it out and tell you what that impact's going to be and what capacity it either frees up or has the opposite impact on future years. Okay, so with that, I think we should open it up for discussion.
If I could just interject one quick thing, sorry. With the grant funding, as we've mentioned, the items that we've identified as potentially funded by grants are definitely not guaranteed. And we certainly don't know if there are grants available, what our share of that funding would be, what the match is going to be. The other thing I wanted to mention is if there are any projects in farther out fiscal years, fiscal 28, 29, fiscal 30, those are still projects that are on our radar. And if grants or other funding opportunities come up for those projects, we have the opportunity to get that funding, then we can certainly bump those up when that funding becomes available and we don't have to wait until that fiscal year.
Commissioner? Yes.
So, quick question. So rules of engagement here, what do you expect as a delivery document at the end of this session? We have 3 hours, so what would be ideal? How are we gonna finish and how we start and how do you guide us?
Well, I can't guide you on priorities. That's really your decision as community leaders. Okay, I can guide you on the interrelationship between projects. Chris and I together will do that. What the financial or organizational capacity limits are for certain things, or the grant impacts are because of what we know we have or is coming. I'm not expecting to walk out of here with a completed document tonight. I expect that I'm going to take notes. I'll be able to look and figure out what some impacts are and say to you, okay, hey, I have this hole here we have to fill, or I have extra monies here we need to spend, and throw that back at you. It's going to be very iterative, back and forth. And I don't know if I answered your question, Commissioner.
Yeah, so we have you, for 3 hours, we only have this session, so I just wanted to make sure realistically to see what we're gonna be able to do.
Mr. I'm sorry, didn't
No,
mean
go
to
ahead,
cut you.
Bradley.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, maybe this is a good time for me just to lay down legally what the parameters are as to what you all can do tonight.
Sure.
So with everything that's been discussed, just so you understand, so everybody's understanding, this workshop is really for the purposes of discussing the items that have been addressed by Alan and Chris, for you to discuss priorities. You're not making any formal vote or any formal decision tonight on how to proceed on any particular project. You're just here to kind of discuss amongst yourselves, because obviously the only way you all as a collegial body can discuss these items is in public. So this is your opportunity to discuss them, to try to come without no formal votes, but a consensus, is so that Chris and Alan have an idea what your policies are with regards to moving forward with the plan. And then at some point, they will bring something back to you during either a special meeting or a commission meeting, a regular meeting, where you can take actual action, formal action on how to proceed.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thanks, Brad. So then if, Alan, if you're interested in kind of opening it up for discussion purposes, do we want to just get a rundown very quickly of what we have here in the fiscal 24 budget?
Sure. Chris, you wanted, or you want me to? Your call.
I can run down.
All right.
All right, so in fiscal 24 proposed, I'm just going to quickly run down from the top. Feel free to jump in if you have questions. The first item is an emergency generator. So we've identified, or we will be identifying, that the police department and Parks and Rec need an emergency generator in the event that we lose power for an extended period because of a storm. So what we anticipated doing was leasing the generator at the Village Hall / police station, and that will be roughly $20,000 out of this current budget. The next item is a license plate
Sorry,
poll reader.
can I stop you as we go?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, and why is it a lease? I was wondering about that.
No,
So-
it's a Commissioner, it's a lease to own.
Okay, so
Right.
basically it's ours to
So
keep it, or
it's-
not
it's-
just,
Right.
Okay.
At the end, you literally pay $1 and it's yours.
yes.
Okay, but it just allows you,
Installments.
it's kind of like financing.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Okay, got it.
Why don't you, Mike?
I assumed it had to be leased to own, but price does seem a little, I mean.
It is, Commissioner. As I said, I was very conservative in my numbers. I don't know if you caught it, but we actually are expecting somewhere between a 4 to 16% interest hit on a lease to own arrangement, not 20%, which is what I put in to have a safety margin.
So what would the hard cost on that be, Chris, if we were just to purchase it instead of leasing to own?
Purchase outright to be right around $100,000.
I recall, Art, you were here. We talked about a generator once before, and it was for the rec center, and it was $60,000 and plus, and this would be the plus, running lines and stuff to it, some electrical stuff and gas lines, but the generator itself was 60. So are you saying the cost you just said is the all-in cost or just for the generator itself?
Nope, that's all, and that's installation. I installed 8 generators last year. And they averaged out to about $100,000. That includes running electrical lines, reconfiguring the panel if we need to reconfigure the panel. That includes the fuel tank storage if we choose to go that route.
Okay, so it's $100,000 all in. And if we do the lease at the end of the lease to own, what will we have paid in interest in total? I just hate paying interest on things.
Anywhere between $4,000 and $16,000, most likely. It could be as high as $35,000. It just depends on the
Across
interest rate.
the term, you're saying?
Correct.
And so the purpose of this, and it was highlighted. So one thing I asked, for me was important getting from Chris was, what are those things per department that are a must-have in order to run
Right.
operation, right? So what are the things that actually we need? And of course, people are not going to know if we have a leak in a roof, but we need to make sure to take care of it so staff is safe, so we have operations running whenever needed. So this was one of the things that came up. So you said, in the case of an emergency, if we have a hurricane and everything shuts down, I think Irma was when it hit, I think it was out for 9 days in my property out of electricity. We had to go somewhere. I mean, it was impossible to be in there. So there will not be operations to run police department and anything else. So this is one of those, it's not a nice to have, but sort of, we've never really invested the way you said it. And it is in case of an emergency, and it does hit, we've been lucky, I guess, so far. We need sort of this going, especially for systems like police department running and safety, et cetera.
Yep, absolutely.
And Commissioner, I would add to that from an emergency operations and emergency response perspective, you're going to see a similar line at Parks and Rec. That's really your only choice for a community facility if you need to hand out food, water, provide temporary shelter for, in some instances, although I don't want to specifically say that because I don't know how the building's rated and whether or not it would be appropriate. But
Yeah.
there are a variety of different purposes that you would need at least one facility like that outside of your police department, because you don't want everyone and their uncle showing up over there
Yeah.
when they're trying their best just to keep things running and maintain public safety. Okay, so that's why the generator's included for both facilities.
So in the case of both, when we talk just about police, it's 135, the estimated cost, plus the, when you say engineering design, I'm guessing those are the blueprints of where it's gonna go, the lines, et cetera, and that will be times 2.
Correct.
Because that's the rec center and the,
One at each, yep.
okay. I'm clear on that one.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I was just gonna say that that's both emergency generators, so we got a line we can skip when we get there, but continue, please.
Absolutely. Next in line is license plate reader poll cameras. We have one for $6,000. The reason we only have one is this is something that's new in this area. I would prefer to have one poll camera right now to make sure it's going to work, make sure it's going to serve our needs versus installing 10 of these and finding out that we just wasted $60,000. So the license plate poll camera is for police public safety. What that camera does is it includes a video of every vehicle that passes it, including license plates. This is used for those things like porch pirates, the roving people that try to get into cars, things like that. Once we identify when and where the crime happened, we can use this poll camera to try to identify vehicles that came through. Next item down the list is the pickleball tennis court upgrade. We've already budgeted $90,000 for that. As we've mentioned, that's not set in stone. We can choose to change that.
Give me a second, Chris. Where you at? So we were in the emergency generator. You said.
I can't hear you, Veronica.
Commissioner, you see
Yeah.
you see the three gray columns?
Yeah.
Okay, the column immediately to the right of that is the fiscal year 24 total.
Yeah.
So that total includes what's already been budgeted. And then there's another column for possible grant funding, and then a third column for additional proposed items. And then that column I just pointed out to you, the next white column after the three gray summarizes the totals for everything. So that's the column that Chris is going down right now.
The total.
The total,
Yeah.
correct.
Chris, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
Going back to the generator, you said this is for one, but we need two, right?
We would need two. We would need one at the police station and one at public or at Parks and Rec.
Where's the other one? on
That's
here?
line 35, Commissioner.
The CIP is divided up by roughly by department.
Oh, I see it. I see it. Okay, thanks.
Can you show me in your Excel where you see the totals that we were talking about?
It is column S here.
Okay, so you're just adding, you're going where you have budget. So you're not going through the list per se on column A, where you're just.
Correct. Just the things
specific-
that we, yep,
Those things are affecting us 2024.
correct.
Okay.
So Commissioner, what we're doing is first reviewing what is proposed for this fiscal year, and then giving you an opportunity to go back and look at what's not funded to discuss anything you want to reprioritize.
So can I ask you a question on the camera? So this is a test, it would be a test that we would do. It's $6,000. Where does all the data live? Who revises data? You don't have OpEx expenses over here.
Yep, that we haven't chosen a vendor and they vary widely, so I can't put something concrete in here. What I can say is, generally speaking, with these, the data lives on a central server, and access, maintenance, things like that could be anywhere between $500 and $1,000 a year, roughly,
A year.
a year.
And so the idea is that we would test this for 2024, and you don't have it for the rest of the year. So based on success, we can include it on the following.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
And is this used for enforcement, or is this sort of after the fact information?
This is after the fact.
Oh, you can't use this to ticket speeders, for example.
No.
Okay, this is if something happens, you have something to go back to see who was coming and going down that particular street, in and out of the village.
Yep, that's part one. So this is one of the solutions that or one of the names we've hit around is a company called Flock Safety. This is the company that I used for Dane County. Back when I was an elected supervisor for the town of Burke, we used them for the Dane County Sheriff's Office in our area. So they provide that after the fact, finding out what vehicles were where and when. Also, in addition, they provide traffic counts. So if we were to put this up at the intersection of 10th and 121st, for example, we would be able to count how many cars are coming through that intersection using this technology.
That data that we're allowed to use at the county level to request changes to traffic mitigation
Yeah, that can be incorporated into a traffic study.
as standalone, separate from a study, they would also accept that data.
Yep.
Do other municipalities around us have this now?
I have no idea.
And,
Okay, because this was not part of our budget. Where did this come from? This is just one of the solutions you and the chief came up with?
This is one of the solutions that we came up with. So the capital improvement plan is a mix of things the commission has mentioned, things that were in the strategic plan, things that I asked my department heads, if we had money, what is it you would like to see? As well as resident comments and concerns.
So,
It
Commissioner-
interests me, and I'd like to understand, not tonight, but I'd like to know more about this before we would proceed with something and make sure it's all usable information. It would provide what we're looking for. And then I immediately go to public records. I don't know if these are subject to public records, and the storage thing that Veronica brought up. We've tripped over things like this in the past where we do things and then we don't have a way to maintain it, use it properly, store it, access it. I'd want to make sure that we're really prepared for that, but it sounds interesting.
so,
Mr.
Mayor-
Weissman?
Yes, thank you. So I'm very familiar with these cameras. We've used them in other jurisdictions. So just to briefly talk about some of the other applications, the manager is correct as to the applications he's listed, but some of the other applications, if they also will create hit lists if you want it to utilize them. And what I mean by hit lists,
Say that one more time, Brad.
yes, they will
what?
also
Like
use,
some other people were, is that?
you
I missed it.
you can create hit lists, or you can utilize hit lists. And the way that
CIT?
what
Okay.
exactly the way they work is, let's say you have a stolen vehicle that's been reported in either your jurisdiction or a neighboring jurisdiction, or you have, if there's a vehicle that's wanted for some reason, say the registered owner has got a warrant out for their arrest, there are lists that are compiled. And what these cameras do is they take a picture of the plate real time. They can automatically run it through these lists, and then they can notify local law enforcement that the specific vehicle from coming from whichever list it is just hit a camera at this particular location. So it can give relatively real time investigative information to law enforcement to act upon.
So Brad, law enforcement agencies are communicating with each other through this. They're feeding information into neighboring, if North Miami, for example, knew we had this, they would be letting us know, they'd be feeding this in plate information, for example, into it.
So it reads, what it does is it collects data from other databases and creates these HIT lists that they call. And so what will happen is it sends an alert. People that are the law enforcement agencies that are subscribing to this service will get that alert, and it's pretty much real time, and they can react to it. As far as the public records, there is some public record requirements, but generally the vendors will maintain the records in the cloud. They do it in cloud storage with some redundant storage to, if there's any criminal justice information required. And so that's usually part of the subscription fees for these cameras that the manager was mentioning earlier.
Quick question. How many entryways do we have into the park again? Do we know off the top of our head?
We have about 18, I believe.
Can I ask
This
a
one
question?
seems like a no-brainer to me. The question is, if you only have one, where to put it?
Yeah.
I think that's probably.
Maybe long-term, you have to think about, well, I can think of 3 or 4 key locations, 8th, 9th.
Yep, absolutely.
We have people coming in constantly.
You had already one in mind, was on 112th and, which one, what did you say?
121 and 10th.
Okay, so it could be, that's to discussion, but at the end of the day, one, and that could eventually turn into more. I have one of a practical question, Bradley. Keep me honest here. I don't know. I'm making this up, but say one of the traffic concerns I hear a lot from residents that speeders are constant and we know about, or maybe we hear about them and they keep doing it. Is this something you can look into the video and say, who is actually this person, and get a license plate, and after the fact, make a sort of a violation ticketing? Is it something that you can use to enforce, or is it basically we're searching for someone particular? No.
Yeah, you
Only you
cannot, can't use it for traffic enforcement. It's not, traffic enforcement has been preempted. Traffic laws have been preempted to the state by the legislature. And the legislature would have to authorize, as they did with red light cameras and school bus cameras, they would have to authorize speeding enforcement through cameras, and they're not there yet. So you would not be able to use that. But it does, the cameras do record. You can set parameters as how long you want to keep those recordings. Although the more storage you keep, obviously the more expensive the subscription is for the maintaining of the records. But you cannot use it directly for the traffic enforcement.
Maybe to your point, I think like in the example of the white tow truck that was speeding down 119th for 2 or 3 months, we could use the camera to see if no one could get their license plate. If you couldn't get the license plate, if you couldn't figure out where they were ending up, you could use this technology to maybe try and figure out where they came in and identify them that way. Right?
And then have a police officer sit there and wait, date and time. You could probably do something like that. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Got it.
for people who are doing it constantly, I mean, I think
Exactly.
have seen the same cars constantly. dipping in and out. So maybe for that, sounds like a great idea.
And so, Mr. Manager, so we've passed that emergency generator, we passed not voting pass, please, that's not what I mean.
We've,
Moving down the list, moving
we
on to
go.
our next one.
so the next item on the list is recreational improvements, rec center upgrades.
I have another question for
oh,
police. I
sure.
did bring up during our conversation. So the chief talked about opportunities of increasing our police presence, which we have actually seen. So does this mean there is a tactical opportunity of a budget assigned per month on top of what we currently have on the budget? Or are you saying there will be no impact of this increased visibility we're seeing in the fiscal year?
So these are going to be two totally different conversations. For the purposes of the capital improvement plan, the capital improvement plan doesn't care about how many officers we have or what percentage of the budget is going towards that. As part of a regular meeting, a regular budget conversation, the commission can say, let's set aside an extra $5,000 a month for additional patrols or whatever that might look like.
And you will be, so the money not necessarily, because the way I see it, this list is pretty much, we're playing with money, sort of say, that on projects that we would like to see. But the basic need to happen. So if we need 5,000 additional, you would decide and present where they would come from. Are we talking about moving budgets around? Is that possible? Or are we talking general fund?
That would be up to the commission. The budget is currently set, so if we want to set aside additional funds for any one type of service or what have you, we would have to pull that from someplace else, and that'd be a decision that the commission would have to make to take 5,000 a month from Parks and Rec and move it into police or whatever that would look like.
And Commissioner, I just want to point out that we did anticipate these types of questions, and we didn't get all the way there, but if you look at column G, you'll see annual OpEx, which is operating expenditures. So we've started to fill that in to give you a sense of what the companion operating budget impact would be.
Yeah, Chris and I spoke about this in detail. I was just wondering, what I wouldn't want to do is we spend a lot of time going through our budget, right? We had several meetings about that, and we made sure that operation is safe across all the departments with everything we wanted to see. Now, because we choose to specifically focus on traffic, for example, and we've seen already more visibility, and it was proposed by the police to come forward with some sort of additional support, where the money is coming from can really affect anything we've already decided. So most likely the answer is either general fund, or you have to resign to a project in the CIP. And that's where I'm going with this question. Do we need to say this $5,000 will come from this budget in particular, project-wise, to supplement what the police department already has? Or no, it can come from the general fund and we'll have the
It
conversation.
could almost come from anywhere as long as we approve it. Chris can come to
Yeah.
us and say he wants to move money from one to.
I know.
He could say, I want to take public works money and use it to spend on additional police. And if we say yes, he can do that. Correct, Chris?
Correct.
Yeah, or he could take money out of the general. We have lots of options when it comes down to where will the money come from.
Yeah.
I want to dovetail on your question, because I think this was your original part of your question, and it went over me. Chris, at our last commission meeting, regular commission meeting, we asked you to come back in March with prices on two things. One was the don't even think about speeding signs, and the other one's this other police, extra police force that we called traffic enforcement, something. So that's not in here. So is that something you'll be bringing to us, and that would be completely outside of this because it's not in this budget necessarily, unless we would decide to do that?
Correct.
Okay.
So
That's why we're not seeing it here, because I know some people were saying, where is that? That's something completely, because it wasn't ever part of the budget conversation. It's a new thing we're dropping in. We haven't decided on anything, but you're going to bring us back information and we'll decide.
And so I'd like to make just sort of a comment to bring this full circle so that everyone's on the same page here. These items on the CIP, the capital improvement plan, are typically one-time items. They're non-recurring. As opposed to what I thought I heard you talking about, Commissioner, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just clarifying here for the listening audience that an ongoing recurring expense would be part of the operating budget. This first step of creating a CIP is a first step. You eventually do want to have a separate capital budget that's distinct from your operating budget. And let's say you end up not spending those monies, they get rolled into that capital budget to fund that item the following year, rather than getting lost. And I've seen this happen in other jurisdictions, getting lost in the general fund budget and spent on something else, and you lose the momentum or everything on the particular capital initiative that you had prioritized and had initially. But in recognition of the relationship between the two, Chris is going to be coming back with more information on annual operating expense impacts for these one-time items. But if you want to, as the commissioner first pointed out, reallocate money from this budget to the operating budget, you wouldn't use capital monies to fund operating monies, because the capital monies, again, are non-recurring. But you could vote as a body to say, we're going to reduce the capital budget by $5,000. Now it's $395 instead of $400, and we're going to add it to the operating budget. Okay.
For the department we can move from. And when you say annual operating expenses, that's the column that you guys are still working on, that we see.
Column G, yes.
Things are popular.
Correct.
So Chris, when Veronica asked you about the license plate poll cameras and the ongoing expenses, that would live in that column.
Correct. For the vast majority of these projects, we don't have the ability to get that into that much detail at this point, because we haven't even decided what they're going to look like. You know, we'd have to pick the vendor and everything else to be able to get down into that level.
Okay, Chris, let's keep going.
All right, let's hit it.
25.
Yep, 25 recreational improvements, rec center upgrades. This line shows something that's absolutely key and crucial to a capital improvement plan, and that's separating out the design and the construction. So we have, for the rec center upgrades, $8,000 set aside this fiscal year, and then you'll notice next fiscal year, we have $32,000 set aside. So the way this process works is we have an architect and engineering firm come in, tell us what this is going to look like, draw up the plans, determine what it is that we need, map out for the rec center upgrade, for example, if we put in an additional concrete pad, if we have to look at additional HVAC equipment or electrical, put all that together, what that's going to look like and how much that's going to cost. Once we have that plan in hand, that gives us the ability to seek that additional funding, whether it's through appropriations, whether it's through grants, whether it's going to the foundation to say we need to raise $40,000 for the building, whatever that looks like. We spend the $8,000 this year to create those plans. And then in the next fiscal years, we start planning out the funds that we're going to need to actually implement those plans or do the construction. So for this year, we estimated roughly $8,000 for some of the rec center upgrades to plan them out. And then next fiscal is when we're going to start paying for them.
So I'm sorry, Chris. So what upgrades are included in that line there?
Rec center upgrades, this is generally internal stuff. So one of the comments that was brought up was improving the kitchen, for example. This may be adding additional covered outdoor spaces. This may be adding additional sails, whatever you have over the kiddie park right now. This may include if we determine some sort of projector or AV system, those types of improvements.
And if you'll look, the very next line is rec center expansion. So the improvements does not include that. That's accounted for separately because there was expressed interest in the survey and elsewhere in seeing that center expanded. But I just wanted to differentiate between that.
Can I ask Chris, the estimate for the 8,000, how close do we anticipate that being? Where does that number come from?
The $8,000 is typically what would be required. We estimated the project at about $40,000, which is roughly average for a small municipal building.
The actual improvements or
correct.
necessary repairs, I guess.
Correct. Correct. That's about average what we would spend on a building of that size for something along these lines, the ideas that I just mentioned. The 20% is estimated design and engineering. That's based on my 15 years of experience. It's typically never going to be as high as 20%. It's typically a lot less, but for the purposes of budgeting, we want to make sure we set aside enough for those, for that engineering service. So once we determine that upgrades like this would typically cost $40,000, that's where the $8,000 comes in.
Can I ask you a question? So you have 40 on estimated cost and you have the 20% aid. Then you have on column S, FY 24 proposed additional aid. What's the difference between that and column T?
Well, let me explain a little bit here. Column P, Q, and R add up to S. And then T.
But why did you add this? Like, why is it one possible grant funding? The other was a proposed additional. What do you mean by that?
What are you looking at? I'm
Column R and column S. On
Yep.
the same line, which is the rec center improvements.
Yep.
You have $8,000 on column S.
They're duplicates, Commissioner.
Okay,
So,
duplicates.
so it's just, column R are all the additional items being proposed. Column S is a total of P, Q, and R.
Let's use, yeah, can we use actual names of the columns instead of the letter and number designations? Because
So
folks aren't going to be able to.
the proposed additional projects are, again, what's proposed for this year. The fiscal year 24 total includes what's additionally proposed, what we expect possible grant funding, and then what's already been budgeted.
So we have budgeted for how much this year?
$8,000.
Those
No, no,
8,000.
no, no. You didn't budget anything yet for this project.
Okay.
They're proposing
Okay.
here.
We're saying as part of the additional, out of the remaining 350,000, the proposal is start with the design for that project, $8,000.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm a little confused about this still because I didn't understand what this was on here and it sounds very sort of fuzzy around the edges. I don't know what this project really is. So it's 40, I know it's $8,000 for design, a total of 40 by the end of next year. But do you have a list you can show us of like, here's what the project includes?
No. And the reason is this wasn't identified as a specifically, we need 4 cup holders, 8 chairs and 6 benches or anything like that. The items that were brought forward were generally speaking, 26 people wanted to see some sort of rec center upgrades. Because we don't have it that granular yet, we're estimating what a generic average upgrade type project would cost. So if this is something that the commission decides they want to move forward with, yes, we want to move forward with those rec center upgrades. That's what $8,000 comes in to figure out what those would be, what those plans would look like, and what the total would end up costing.
Okay, so I'm a little uncomfortable with that because I want to know going in before we spend $8,000 on design, and this is just my personal desire. I want to know what is it that we think we need? Is it we need a new refrigerator and the faucet needs to be replaced and all the plumbing needs to be fixed in the bathrooms and the soap holders aren't working? I don't know. It just sounds very vague. And I don't
So,
want to spend $8,000. Have someone come in and tell us what we need. We should know what we need before we start a project.
Well, so Commissioner, you could bring in a design firm and you can phase it. First phase is do an assessment, come back to you and report, these are the things that we believe need upgrades. It could be aesthetic, it could be functional, like the kitchen, it could be mechanical. And I differentiate between replacing a light fixture versus having to upgrade the wiring in the wall.
But why wouldn't we decide that first? Why do we need, I'm sure a designer could come in and tell us we need all kinds of fabulous things. I'm sure they'd be happy to take our money to tell us you need to renovate this whole building and here's how much it will cost. I wouldn't have a designer come into my kitchen and tell me, here are all the things you need to do in your kitchen. I would first say, the refrigerator needs to be replaced. The dishwasher is leaking all over the floor. The cabinets are in good shape. I'll just get them repainted instead of replaced. I would know what I want before I have someone come in and tell me what I want. Because there are all kinds of people who'll be happy to take our money. But it seems to me if we say our rec center needs renovation, and I'm going to guess a lot of people that said that in the survey are just saying that building's kind of dumpy. It should look better.
Is there a way that we can, I don't know, call this out or anything else that we don't have granularity yet, that we're not comfortable?
Yeah, that's what we're doing here tonight. Yeah.
Mhm.
We can just,
Yeah, so this one has me a little like, I'm not sure what we're spending 8,000. I know that we could spend $8,000 very easily like that. We could spend $80,000 having someone come in and tell us what it should be. But I think we need to start with a list of here are the problems at the rec center that need to be fixed. And it could be aesthetic. It could be, you know what, and it needs to be painted too. It looks crappy.
I would,
Dingy.
and I was gonna add to that, so, I agree. I think we need specific list of things that need to happen. And I would like to see a column next to it with what the foundation is doing and what the current plans for that.
And there's
is.
that, yeah.
And so you have certain projects that have been happening for the past couple of years, you guys have been working on. So there's stuff that's going to happen that not necessarily comes from our budget. Exactly. So part of that is check, check, check. Yeah, for the CIP, I think, you know, if you come home, I can tell you a list of things that need to happen. We sort of need the same thing from ESA, from, you know, whomever, but a list, detailed list on that, and just comparison on what could be done with the foundation.
And what is being done, because we gave them money, you
Right,
know.
so I think at a minimum, what we can probably do is sit down with staff and do a deep dive into this, come back with a list of specific items that staff has identified based on their operational knowledge and based on what they're hearing from your constituents.
I thought it was going to be, Chris, some hard stuff there. Aren't there still some issues at the rec center with leaking buildings and things? I thought that's what this was going to be more about.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, because just to be on the same, kind of continuing to what you're saying, for me, that there are two different things. One is what the community would like to see, to the point of, oh, it doesn't look great. Well, maybe it's the color, you know, but we painted it 3 months ago. I don't know. They're currently painting the inside of it. And there's going through major renovation, and we've added furniture, and it's, you know, books, and we have all sort of stuff going, that it's been ongoing. It's not finalized, but that's stuff that nobody else would know except for ESA. So he kind of needs to go through the list, right? That's how I'm thinking it could work. It's a list of all the internal stuff. The community then can say, we want a better rec center, and that could mean many different things, programs and all this sort of things. But the must-have versus what you guys are doing, the foundation, I think that will be the first list.
And it might turn out that we need to put more money at it. You know, it might turn out that, you know, we get this list.
More than that.
realize
Needed.
So
it's more
folks,
than-
I think we're really clear on your concerns, and we can come back and address them.
There we go.
Chris?
All right, the next item on there, going down to row 31, placeholder for a dog park. This was identified as part of the strategic plan. I don't have any information on what this would look like. The estimate that I gave for $90,000 is roughly what it would take to erect fencing and the other necessary infrastructure just out here next to the log cabin. This one is a little different in that the design would be $18,000. Just to make numbers work a little bit, we budgeted the $18,000 for design in this fiscal plus extra, with the balance coming out in fiscal 25.
do we know where would be targeted geographically?
We do not.
No, we threw around some ideas, which we don't want to get into tonight. That's a level of granularity that, all right, but I just want to add that what we talked about the possibility of 2 fenced-in areas. So you have a small dog and a large dog, which is what most facilities have. And we also talked about parking spaces, where we did look at some opportunities for a centrally located facility, but even that is still going to be far away for some residents who are probably going to want to drive to it. So you provide a minimal number of parking spaces and hope that most people will walk their dog to the facility. But so it includes, the upgrade to the land, the fencing, signage, the parking spaces. And sign.
So Ellen, I think maybe a little bit of clarification might help. At this stage in the process of planning a capital improvement plan, we are not down to that granular level. We are saying big picture, these are the things that we would like to have. This is roughly what we can expect to pay for these things that we would like to have. And the commission decides, yes, this is something worthy of donating or not donating, but allocating time and money towards. Once that happens, then we get into the details. Then we get into which streets can support this, which medians can support this, which fence companies would we use, what would those fences look like, what design firm do we have to choose, and what would those exact expenses be. So at this phase of the capital improvement plan, it's more, I guess you would say, big picture. Where do we want to go? What do we want that to be? And then once that decision is made, if we decide, yes, we want a dog park, no, we don't necessarily want rec center expansion, then we can focus in on getting those additional details. And then that's the level of detail that we come back to the commission saying, okay, you said, yes, the dog park, here is the fencing company, here are the options for locating it, here's what this is going to look like. Is that fair, Alan?
Yes, it is. And by the way, the reason we assume planning for something like this, once you made a decision, isn't going to take that long. It's a
Yeah.
pretty simple thing, which is why there's some construction money in there in addition to just the planning money in that first year. So it's not just 18, but it's 63.
So Chris, the $90,000 you said was for it was your, I guesstimate that included fencing and
Parking.
That's fencing, potential parking, the waste receptacles that we would have to have, all those sorts of things, the infrastructure to create that fenced-in area.
Did you contact any other cities or buildings or communities that installed any to see what they spent?
For the dog park, no. Instead of contacting communities, because each one looks different, I contacted several fencing companies to say, hey, just ballpark something for me. If we're looking at putting in 100 feet of fencing and a concrete pad, what would this look like?
Okay. Is there, and this is maybe too granular, but is there any kind of insurance? Is there any kind of other impact in other departments when you add a dog park in, liability kind of things that then become part of the picture? I know that would kind of be an ongoing thing, but is there any additional expense like that?
Yeah, that's kind of getting down into the weeds. The answer to all of these is yes, there's additional considerations. If we have a dog park, then we have to take a look at how much it's going to cost us to purchase the poop bags, how much it's going to cost us to have a Parks and Rec guy come out and exchange the bags, those sorts of
There's
things.
a bigger thing like insurance, like is there some challenge with that? Okay.
Maintenance also on an ongoing basis will be a question, right? Granular question to your point.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we should try to accomplish is focusing on what things we want to do. That gives me the information I need to say, okay, this is what the commission wants to accomplish. Now let's get all those details. And then we decide whether or not to move forward.
Can I ask, do we have, so we have a lot of, when it comes to dogs particularly, we have some stuff going on in the village. So we have certain stations within different corners where we have the poop bags and the trash trash cans. Are there opportunities? I don't know if you guys have noticed about other corners that are now being addressed that they never were touched. And I don't know when they were installed. But it seems to me that there are few areas that they could be added to as an
Sponsored
extension.
as well. I can't see you.
Yeah, there you go.
They were sponsored and I think paid for. I don't think they came, I don't think they necessarily came out of the village budget. I think some residents sponsored them and had their dogs, like deceased dogs put on them kind of a thing.
Okay.
And
So
village didn't pay
that's
for it.
good. Oh, deceased, what?
Well, someone whose dog passed away. It was like in memory of Fido,
Sweet.
Yeah, look at some of them. They have the dog's name is up there and the owner's name. Yeah.
So that was my first thought. And then the second is, so I don't for me, this is a bidding process. So we already went bidding for pickleball, and although pickleball was down the list, we did that. And I think it was the idea with that one, I remember I didn't vote for it, but I know the original idea was let's see how much money it is, right? so that we can consider or not. This is higher on the list, just following the same rationale. I would say, let's just find out what exactly would it take. And then that's the other thought that comes to mind is where, because I think that's the biggest thing, and liabilities. And I think you brought it up. So where would something like this be? And I think that would define the size and the scope of the project, and then liability. So it's a big kind of guess cost at this point. And so why not bid for it? Just ask how much would it, take?
I can tell you that we're gonna have to spend about $18,000 to figure that out. Because we're going to have to start with the land use surveys where we can fit something like this, where we can park people. We're gonna have to take a look at how we can accommodate those cars. We're gonna have to take a look at the planning. We're gonna have to take a look at things like buried water lines, if there are buried
So
utility lines.
are you
things
saying
like
the 18 grand that are here for design need to be spent?
For us to figure out the answers to your other questions.
But we didn't do that for pickleball.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep. Pickleball is a little different in that we said in the northwest corner of this park, we want pickleball. Tell us how much that's going to be.
Yeah.
So it was a very specific situation. For something like this, what did we identify? 4 or 5 different locations that this could possibly be? Trying to figure out where it can be, what that would look like. We would need that design. The commission can come back and say, we want to put a dog park right out here next to the log cabin. I can make phone calls tomorrow and know exactly how much it's going to cost.
As with pickleball, we gave you a size, we talked about a size, we had a location, we tightened it up for you a little bit so you could.
Correct.
We could do, Veronica, we could do that. We could kind of, and let him go get a harder price for us, and that would help us make that decision.
I just think it would be fair to have a clear estimate, maybe together with Public Work Director, getting a recommendation from him in terms of where could it be placed. Initially, I'm saying for the bidding process, before we even move to design. I mean, the same question applies that we had for pickleball and that we discussed was, are there pipes under there that, we can build a concrete pad on? There's so this questions up in the air until we actually go through design. But just do due diligence on finding out if there is a potential, if there is interest. Certainly more than the pickleball was already showcased. So maybe we ask for help with the staff to designate an area, and you come to a proposal on a commission meeting for an item where we can talk about potential sizes and potential places, and based on that.
Commissioner, could you just
a
clarify
cost.
which item you're talking about?
Dog park.
The dog park.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then something I said earlier, I'm gonna bring it back, and this is the perfect example of something that we might go raise private money for. So it could be that, okay, we find out
Something
it
branded.
says 90,000 here. Let's say it's 40,000. Let's say it was a lot cheaper. Or we just said, we'll do one for now and see how it goes. And maybe maybe we'll do one now and have dogs of all sizes. And then if we decide there's a need to have, a big dog and a small dog, well, then we do another one. But this could be something that we say, let's go raise the money. Let's go raise the money. Let's go ask all the local vets and the dog grooming places and the dog boarding places. And let's figure out what kind of money they would give, and would they get naming rights and all of that stuff. This is where we get creative and we try to come up with things that are outside the budget and save the budget for more important things, what I call harder things,
Yeah, look at $90,000. That plants a lot of trees and fixes a lot of roads.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying is like we can start getting creative and deciding every year is, let's give ourselves a project to fund privately every single year, and how we're going to make that happen and what it looks like. I hate to sound like Pollyanna, like we'll put a show on in the barn and we'll raise all the money, but it's kind of like that. It's like, you go ask people for money and you'd be surprised people that will give you money. You go to all the local realtors that do business in town, stuff like that.
So Alan, maybe you can help me vocalize or explain this. So what I'm looking for, I absolutely agree. It would be great to have this additional information. I don't know whether I need to get that information for the dog park, the water stations, the activity pavilions, the band shell, or what have you. So that's kind of looking for that guidance from the commission as to what's important. I don't know the best way to say that.
Can I suggest to that something? I mean, I'm
Go ahead, and
simplifying it.
yes, and then
And you tell me, because this could be very simplistic way of looking at it, and it's not like that, but, so Military Trail Park over here, very close to us, has, a dog park. Can we go through the county and talk to them and say, how much did it cost? And then calculate based on the space, it's just as
Yeah.
an average? And then present that to us and say, this is sort of, and, you know, in any given median, the larger spaces, plus this corner that we have available here. I mean, the open spaces that we have, you can identify. You can't fit more than a 20 by 20. A 20 by 20, based on a comparison to another city, is
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're saying two different things. I'm not saying, no, that's not what we should do. That's absolutely the way to approach this. Once we figure out what we want to do, what I'm saying is there's, I don't know, 80, 90 projects on here. That's enough to keep a manager busy for the next 10 years. Where do we start?
okay. I see your point. All right.
Okay, so if you're looking for us to kind of, I know we're not voting on things tonight, just to kind of like, how enthusiastic are we about things like this?
Exactly. What's
And I'll
more
say that
important,
I'm
a
enthusiastic
dog park
about
or
the
a
dog
water
park.
park? Yeah.
Dog park, I'm very enthusiastic about. If that's what you're looking
Alright,
for. us
so,
to do.
Let's,
so, but
yeah.
before we start making statements like that, let us get through the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna
Okay.
suggest. I think we go down it, we see where the other money is, and if we prefer to
Exactly.
put.
And then
shift
we have
things-
that discussion about what you're enthusiastic.
Okay, at that time, are we gonna be able to go back and say, okay, there are some things on here that weren't discussed to start
Yes.
this year, and I think they should be, or we do that now as they're,
No.
as they're passed?
No,
Okay.
no,
Fair enough.
after we go through the original list. Chris,
All right, so the next item on there is the emergency generator at Parks and Rec, and I'm not going to go into more detail on that. The next four things are projects that are somewhat already in progress. The Parks and Rec electrical design, log cabin roof and ADA walkway, Edberg Park master plan, and log cabin parking lot. Those are things that were all either funded in fiscal 23, wholly or partially, or were enumerated in the current budget.
And the money that we see in the 23 fiscal year 23 column, where is that money now? I don't see it in the 24 columns.
Sitting in the checking account.
So it's just sitting there and it's still accessible to us. So anything in the 23 column is really still in play as well.
Correct.
Got it.
right, and Commissioner, if you look at FY 23 allocated, let's say the electric design project, follow it over to FY 24.
I see it there, yeah, but I don't
Right.
see it every, okay.
No, and you're right. The log cabin is in the grants column,
Mhm.
and the Ed Burke is in the 23 column, and the log cabin parking lot is in the FY 24 budget column. So different places.
Got it. Okay.
Trying to pull it all.
Just want to make sure that that's all still in play.
Yes,
So with each of those projects,
those are self-explanatory. Let's keep going.
thank you, Public Works, the Public Works Equipment Building. We're looking at about $120,000. This is to repair or to replace the condemned garage. So this is about $24,000 for the design and engineering for it. And then the balance is the actual construction.
What-
This is completely raising the existing garage, putting in the appropriate concrete pad below, building the building, which is everything from HVAC to electrical to structure.
We're talking about a pretty simplistic Butler style building, if you're familiar. You know, the metal structure.
Yeah, nothing extravagant.
You're
Um,
currently spending money for those containers that we have in place?
We purchased those and it wasn't that much. It was actually under my purchase authority.
We will get to keep those, and
We could keep them. Ideally, we would sell them once we get the building erected. The less junk back there, the better.
Dog park.
Joke.
right.
So that is one of the projects that I highly recommend that we keep in this CIP and accomplish this year. And the reason is, I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit. The reason is, we need to protect our equipment. If we don't protect our equipment, come this next rainy season, we're going to have all sorts of issues with animals getting under there to hide and chewing the wiring and everything else.
Okay.
Which item are you talking about?
That was 41 Public Works Equipment Building. The next item in the list is number 43, median swales, green spaces, planting and improvements. This was identified, as Alan had previously explained, the combination of things with 101 people for it. What we're proposing is spending $10,000 this year. We're going to have to bring in things like landscape architects to determine what this is going to be. So let's go ahead and get that plan this year. And then next fiscal, we can talk about the actual implementation costs. Now, this is indicated as a most likely able to secure a grant type of expense. If this is something the commission wants to move forward with, then this is something that we would start focusing on locating grants for. Generally speaking, in this area, we're able to get grants for things like this.
Generally speaking, those grants usually don't pay out until the next fiscal year, like the one that was related to the log cabin that we discussed, right?
It depends. It depends.
Okay, so you're saying, I see that it's a grant, but you're saying a total of 40 to spend here in the next 2 years. I'm sorry, 40 to spend in the next 2 years. 10 of it would be design this year.
Correct.
Okay, well, my only comment on that is I'm not certain we need to hire a landscape architect to design our medians. We have done fine things through our Parks and Parkways board, and I think $10,000 spent on a consultant for a plan is a lot of plans that can be put in place. So that's my feeling on it. I think we can do that on our own. I think sometimes we need to sort of rein in what we really need.
So I'm going to contradict that. And the reason is a lot of the grant issuers want to see those plans. So one of the things that I try to do is present the plans. This is specifically what the architect is saying we should do, or what they recommend that we do. And then we have that exact data for the grant reviewers. And Alan, you were going to jump in.
And that, but you're
No,
saying it's
so-
$10,000 for a grant and $10,000 for
so-
design, so it's a wash.
And Commissioner, I'm going to ask if we could just get through the list and then go back and.
Oh, I'm sorry. We started by having comments about things as we went. So are we going to comment as we go or are we not? I'm not to be argumentative, but it's what we've been doing. And all of a sudden we're going to stop. The only point I want to make is a $10,000 grant is going to pay for a $10,000 landscape architect and it doesn't buy us a bush.
So Commissioner, I've heard questions and other items. Okay, and.
Well, I asked a question and I got my answer.
No, and you did, but Chris's point is critically important, is that having a formal structured plan enhances your ability to get the grant funding that you're going to need.
Okay, but I'm looking at what you put in front of us, Alan, and you're saying $10,000 grant, $10,000 for the design, the landscape
Yes.
architect. It's a wash. So you got a grant to pay for a landscape architect, and I'm saying we don't need the landscape architect, so we don't need the grant. $10,000 grant, $10,000 landscape architect. We paid for something I'm saying I don't think we need is my point. So what do you need the grant for if we don't need the landscape architect? That's my point.
There are typically two types of grants available. This is like, for example, the Safer Streets for All that we're doing. The first type of grant is planning and the second type of grant is implementation. So we can go out and get a $10,000 grant for planning. Those funds can't be used for implementation. We can't say, thank you for the $10,000 for planning. We're going to buy $10,000 trees or whatever.
I understand that, but I'm just looking at these two numbers side by side. $10,000 grant, $10,000 for the landscape architect. If we don't need a landscape architect, then we can say, no, thanks, we don't need your grant and just spend the $30,000 that we were going to spend anyway.
No, but the $30,000 is predicated on you having a plan developed by a landscape architect.
Or the
you-
board. We have a Parks and Parkways board that if we worked with them and got them for how many decades, Barbara, did our Parks and Parkways board do a beautiful job designing things for us for free? And we do have a plan, and we do have a plan.
So there may be a misunderstanding because the $30,000 in fiscal 25 proposed is also a grant.
No,
Well, it doesn't say that here.
Yeah, it's in blue.
Everything that's in blue is
Oh, I'm sorry.
is a grant. Okay. Chris, let's move on, please.
All right, jumping down to removal of compromised trees, that's already in the budget, that's already proceeding. Same thing with the Safer Streets for All SS4A grant.
Well, actually, can you clarify that in light of the new grant?
So we had originally put aside about $20,000 for a traffic study. The Safer Streets for All grant is a total grant to us of $100,000. It requires us to have $25,000 matching. So what we're doing is using the 20-ish thousand dollars that we had set aside for our own traffic study as the required match for the Safer Streets for All. So instead of getting a roughly $20,000 traffic study over for specific intersections, we're getting a $125,000 study that focuses more on need, safety, accidents, things like that, rather than just counting traffic.
Traffic counts.
So the more pared down version that we would be, for sake of argument, you know, if we were paying it for it on our own, we'd be getting a more pared down version of a traffic study then. So we're saying by matching this grant, we're
Getting
getting
a
more data
much
that,
bigger.
and that just opens up options for us.
Mhm.
Just want to understand it.
So
When Safer Streets for All comes back and says the intersection of 10th and 121st is a problem intersection because there are these accidents there, that carries a lot of weight when we go back to the Safer Streets for All implementation grant part of that and say, all right, you said this was the problem, help us pay for it.
but it does include traffic counts too. So it's what we had talked about before and a whole lot more.
Correct.
And it's also, will it cover more geographic area of the village? Because that was our other limitation, was only certain places in the village for the other traffic study.
It's, I'm gonna put the caveat in there again, like I did at the last commission meeting. This is a brand new grant. It was just decided in December. Nobody has done this before. Our understanding at this point is yes.
This is if our understanding is correct, if your understanding is correct, this is a big gain on this general topic in terms
Yes.
of the data that we'll have to move forward effectively and make sound decisions based on facts.
Correct. All right, jumping down to roadway drainage improvements. This one is a little bit messy. And the reason is we have some funds set aside from fiscal 24. We had, I believe all of this was going to come out of CITT funding. However, one of the things that I asked our grant writer to work, or our lobbyist to work on, was appropriations for these projects. So even though we've already set the funding aside, we may be getting grant funding. If we do get that grant funding, that frees up what we were planning on spending so that we can start applying that to the next phase of the project. So instead of just completing phases 1B and 2, we might be able to, depending on what we get for grants, seriously dig into phase 3 and start some of that work as well.
You have an idea on timeline?
I don't. It passed the House, which, as long as the governor doesn't veto, means we should be getting at least $400,000. It's really up to the Senate to pass their version, then it has to go through reconciliation, and then it has to get through the governor's office.
This is what you emailed us today. Did you send us an update on this today? No?
I don't believe it was today. I know I've sent an email update on it. So the bottom line is there's really nothing to discuss on this at this point. You know, we've already set the funding aside and we're working on additional funding sources for it. Jumping down a little bit, we have road repair upgrades. I am proposing that we budget $30,000, or that we include $30,000 in the CIP budget for this fiscal year. And that is going to be to start with, this stretch right out here by the log cabin, where it is absolutely falling apart. And there was one other stretch, I don't remember where off the top of my head, where we would be doing some grinding down. The other thing we could do instead of that, instead of doing those actual physical repairs right away, is bring in an engineering company to take a look at our roads overall, use that $30,000 to fund the study to tell us what is high priority, and what can wait.
And let me add, excuse me, I'll add to this on something that Chris and I discussed. You have, looking ahead to the sewer project, most of your roads would host a pipe, a force main, okay? The exception to that would be where you have large medians, okay? In the case where you have a large median, essentially the road is split. One of those two roads will host a pipe, the other will not. Okay, so what Chris and I talked about is looking at what the existing infrastructure is under those roads. One might lend itself better to having a force main and the other might not. And then the one that doesn't is a candidate for future road improvement that we wouldn't have to worry about being torn up later.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think I misunderstood something you said. We have we'll call them regular medians like,
Let's
117th
talk
Street.
about right out here.
Okay, this one would have one on each side. This is a large median. There'd have to be there'd be a sewer line running down each side. They wouldn't.
No.
You're
No.
saying the houses here would go all the way under this huge median?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes. Absolutely.
I mean, on the smaller ones, like 117th Street, most of them, the narrower ones, that makes perfect sense, right? Because they're popping under like a 6-foot median. So they would connect, this house would connect all the way over there.
Correct.
It's easier than it sounds. If you have the right equipment.
Right. You do,
The longer my point is the longer the distance, the more gravity you have to deal with, more gravity to get down.
true, right. But there's horizontal directional drilling and other techniques to do it. It is pretty easy, or easier than it used to be.
So the other item I want to, or the other consideration for this particular line 59 road repairs upgrades. I have an estimated total cost of $18 million. That is a very broad, very huge guess. Most of the roads in Biscayne Park need work to some degree or another. We cannot afford to do all of those roads. So what I propose doing is dividing up those costs over the next 10 fiscal years. You'll see, for example, fiscal 24, I'm proposing 30. In 25, it goes up to 200 and then 300 and then 400. The purpose of doing it this way is to try to identify how long it's going to take us to accomplish all those assumed repairs. But the other purpose of doing it this way is for the grant and allocation or the appropriation funding perspective. By us showing what we're planning on doing, that gives us the ability to apply for some of those grants and get some of those appropriations.
Both for the road work and separately for the sewer project, which could have a profound impact on the spending in this area as well.
Correct.
And just, where are we? with-
Jumping down to 66 in administration.
Oh, no, I was gonna just say that just for the listening audience, we have 120, so Chris talked about 18 million for roads. We have 120 million listed for sewer. That's to put in sewer for the entire village.
And that is actually a good educated guess. The rough cost is $60,000 per parcel. And we have, it was roughly, I believe it had roughly 2,000 parcels.
About the sewer connection. So in Miami Shores is currently in the process of this. And my understanding is that the homeowners themselves have to pay for the connection from their homes to the main line, right?
Yes,
Any idea what that cost is today?
60,000 a parcel.
$60,000 per household.
Yeah.
No, wait, no.
There's two different.
No, I think he's asking you something different.
Oh, okay.
Not the installation of the force main, but for a homeowner to connect to the force
Oh,
main.
gotcha.
Anywhere between 15 to 20.
15 to
Yeah,
25.
yep,
15 to 25,000.
correct. Sorry.
Funding, but the funding, the discussions, you know.
And let me anticipate two questions. One is that some jurisdictions will pay for that outright. Some will subsidize a portion of it. They'll try and get grant funding to do so. In the case of a situation where you might have a main going down one road and not two, you might pay for the extra distance to get over there so that everybody's equitably paying for the same to get from their home or property to where the force main is, and you would cover those types of situations. That would be fair. Okay.
And the other thing to consider with septic to sewer is this is something that is being discussed a lot, specifically because of Biscayne Bay. So this is definitely on the radar of the local municipalities, the county, and the state, as well as the feds. So I'm certainly not going to make any promises, but there's a fairly good chance that we will see funding coming down the road. Most likely, what that would look like is North Miami, Miami Shores, El Portal, Biscayne Park, all get together and are part of this big project with funding coming from federal DOT or EPA or who knows what that would look like. All right, jumping down to administration 66. Line 66, the resident communication systems update, already funded, already budgeted, already in progress. And the same thing with the vulnerability study. Our kickoff meeting, by the way, Mr. Mayor, is going to be on that 28th. We'll have the first community input on the vulnerability assessment.
I have a question. Brad? Not a comment. I'm sorry, Alan.
Yes, sir.
Chris, resident communication systems update. A lot of comments here tonight about communications. Can you just fill everybody in on what that is exactly, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping to present a demo of that last commission meeting. We'll have to do it for this next commission meeting. What this is, it's an actual Biscayne Park app. The public facing side of this is the ability to contact any department within Biscayne Park government using the mobile phone. Residents can, for example, take a picture of a pothole and that goes direct to Public Works. Take a picture of a code violation and that goes directly into code. So it's that initial communication. On the back end, it is an entire workload management system. So once you take that picture of the pothole, it goes into Public Works. We now have that in our system. We can track when the request was made, where the issue is. We'll know if there are multiple people having the same issue or noticing the same problem. We can start tracking how long it's taking us to respond to resident inquiries. We can start planning. If we have 5 people reporting the same pothole, we know what to focus on next month with some of our funds. The other piece of the Biscayne Park app that's coming out is the public communication piece. There are push notifications that go to cell phones. So it's a push notification for the cell phone. It can go out via text. It can go out via email. And it also interfaces with Instagram, Facebook, and Nextdoor for notifications. So the challenge that we currently have, of course, is 20 different systems with 20 different logins, 20 different ways to report. With our new communication system, we type in the message we need to get out, we hit the button, and it goes out everywhere that we need it to go. So that's questions on the communications?
The $35,000 price tag on, I thought it was less than that.
It is less than that. $35,000 is what was budgeted.
So what is the actual hard cost?
We are going to be just north of 9,000, I believe, for that particular component, that app.
Then you had the web revamp.
Yep, we're going to take a look at doing the web redesign project. We have the public records request software on there. Those are things that we don't necessarily have the exact cost for yet.
Because the whole idea of the app and the feedback I gave Chris, I think it's a great idea as long as it's feeding from a well-sourced website.
Correct.
Otherwise, it will be a mirror of what we currently have, which we know we have to.
Yep, we're currently deficient in the website.
And it's only as good as the number of people who are aware of it and are engaged with it.
And that's the purpose of My Biscayne Park app. We just got done with our meeting. I don't remember what day that was. They have a whole slew of marketing materials for us that we can implement. We'll be coming before the board with that information at a later point.
Next.
Vulnerability study. This is also in progress. Let me back up, shameless plug for the vulnerability study. We're going to have our first public input session on the 28th, the 28th, a week from Wednesday, next Wednesday. This is actually going to help guide some of the other projects that we have listed on here. The vulnerability study is taking a look at our drainage infrastructure. What structures are in danger if we get 10-year floods, 100-year floods, king tides, major storms, that sort of thing. This is going to guide us for some of the infrastructure projects that we're doing. This may change the future phases of the drain installation projects. So we have that kicking off. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll jump down to the next one. All right, next one is 69, electronic access.
Chris,
Yeah,
can you go back up to line 67? I think we might have glazed over that.
vulnerability study,
No, right above it.
resident communications.
No, the log cabin
Cabin
roof and walkway.
walkway.
You don't have that on yours?
No, I have a, there must be a hidden row. What is the project?
Log cabin roof and walkway.
It's indicated as being funded by.
Oh, you know what?
Oh, that's
Hold on,
it's a
hold on,
duplicate. It's a
hold on.
duplicate.
No, it's a duplicate. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Yep,
I-
line
look at-
37.
Yeah, 37. It's up there.
It's over here, okay.
Yeah, line 37.
Wait a minute, line 37.
Up on.
I have the same line that I have the same one.
It's on both. It's under Parks and Rec as well.
This one, I see it as under fiscal year 24 total. I see it in my version here being funded by a grant. Up there, it doesn't look that that's the case. Or is that just?
Yeah, look at line 37. Line 37 is correct. The total project is going to be about $156,000. We are expecting a grant. We're just waiting for those funds to come through for $78,000. That is going to be the design in the first part. We have limited information at this point on what that grant is specifically going to cover because it hasn't been actually given to us yet. But we expect that $78,000.
So about half of it's grant and half of it's ours.
Correct.
And it says log cabin roof and ADA walkway. Chris, does it also include the lighting? Because when we had someone come and design this for us a couple of years ago, this was already designed once. And I don't know if you would consider it a design that you could implement, but we did spend money on this already. It included lighting as well. No?
Because lighting was a whole lot more money.
But it was on the estimate.
No.
It showed the price for it. Because it had schematics of like where they were required to be and.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, but I thought the plan showed it, they showed us what it would
I
cost.
think initially it did.
Yeah.
But then it was scaled back because the cost was, and then a couple of people around here didn't want like.
Well, that I know of, but I think we need to get back and have that conversation because we were told by the attorney at the time that it's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
The grant application did not have lighting. The grant application was refurbishing the roof and then adjusting the ADA walkway and access out here. That was done before my time, so I don't have that history on it.
When it comes back up, we're gonna have to kind of loop back and have that bigger conversation because it was made very clear to us by our attorneys that, we could find ourselves in a bad place because of the lighting out there.
Okay. Chris?
All right, so next up is my line 69, the electronic access control at Village Hall and the Police Department. Technically speaking, we only need electronic access at the police department. However, there's a lot of traffic back and forth between the two buildings, especially after hours, so it makes sense to do the electronic access at both. What this includes is the key card access with a card reader. So officers, rather than have physical keys, will flash their card to the reader that lets them in to the building. This logs who is coming in, which doors, who is leaving, which doors, and when. The other component of this that is critically important, especially as we look at our upcoming accreditation, is biometric access to the evidence room in the police department. So one of the things that we had looked at to be able to, let me back up. Right now, it's still physical. So you punch a combination, you punch in a key code, and you're able to get in. That does not say that it was actually me using my key code. That just says my key code was used. So by putting in biometrics, which is either a facial scanner, kind of like the time clock we have over at Public Works, or a fingerprint, that is going to log without a doubt who that person was that was accessing. This is adding an additional layer of accountability. And we need that both as a preventative measure, but also as an auditable track of who's going in and where. This cost I've actually received, this is under the threshold for request for proposal. We just need the 3 bids. This is probably going to come in closer to 25,000 rather than 35,000. But we put in 35,000 for any unanticipated issues.
Okay, next.
Next up is moving the log cabin to the Village Hall area.
And Chris, did something change? I thought this was a grant item.
You thought, what was that?
I thought we had this as a grant item. Did that change?
Electronic access or the?
No, the moving of the.
Oh, the moving to Village Hall, yeah. The grants that I was able to find are for refurbishing, repairing and maintaining and not for moving.
Okay, all right.
So if we want to completely redo it and leave it where it is, we can probably find funds for it. But as for moving, there's nothing available that I was able to find.
All right, so that changes our bottom line numbers then.
Correct.
Okay, so instead of 350, we're at.
Yeah.
730.
Yeah.
Or
I'm sorry,
630.
Chris, I didn't understand something you said. You said it could be used for refurbishing, basically. If we kept it where it is, it's a privately owned structure. We could get a grant to refurbish it and keep it where it is.
I was explaining the difference between refurbishing and moving.
Not
Oh, so
specific
it's
to that
not
property.
specific to this
No,
one. Okay.
no.
Correct. So if that's something we want to do, we're going to have to pony up almost $300,000 for that. One of the conversations that the mayor and I had was using that as a fundraiser. For about $20,000, just rough back of the napkin kind of math, we can have a contractor come in that will actually more carefully dismantle it. And then we can auction off pieces of a historic log cabin. And those funds, even though we can't save that cabin, those funds could be used for additional projects, whether it's repairing this or whatever, whatever we end up doing to kind of preserve some of the other history here in Biscayne Park. So that's just something to keep in the back of your minds.
Some other context on that too is I had a call with the Dade County Trust and the Historic Preservation Group. The very short answer to that long conversation is they really can't help us. They proposed certain things that we could do, mostly it was grassroots campaigns. Go around and ask people for money to try and raise enough money to save the thing. But they recommended a grant that was available opening on April 1st, but the funds wouldn't be dispersed, assuming we get it, funds wouldn't be dispersed until the following year. And unfortunately, under the timelines that we have, that's not really gonna work. So the answer was, well, another answer that they gave was, well, we could designate it as historical, but that would put the owner in a very difficult position. He's been patient with us, he's been willing to work with us. That would kind of be like pulling the rug out from underneath him.
And he could get it torn down before we get that done anyway.
That would take time too. So I don't think that's, they recommended, well, we could do a public outreach. We could go to the Miami Herald and we could say, we got to save this thing. It's the same thing that, that might kind of vilify the owner in the public forum. But they said, look, we're willing to help if you want to do a grassroots campaign to try and raise the money, but that's under the timelines. I just don't know if that's realistic. But
you guys,
I'm sorry, can I interrupt? The attorney just raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to add, I had done some research about incentives that you might be able to give the developer. And there really are no tax incentives that you could, that would really either be beneficial to the developer or to the village with regards to the cabin, getting him to keep it on that property.
You're gonna say? Oh.
Chris?
Do you all hear me?
Yes.
We did.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Solar?
Yep, the final item on there is solar, installing solar on all public buildings. This too is just a very best guess of about $33,000 a building. A lot of that is we'll actually learn a lot more about that when we complete the electrical project over at Public Works. One of the things over at Parks and Rec, one of the things they're focusing on there is installation of what we would need to do to be able to install a generator in solar. So that'll help guide some of our costs. For that, we're assuming that there probably would be a grant available. Solar is another hot button thing, especially in storm prone areas or I forget how they phrase it, power insecure areas where the infrastructure could go down with storms. So even though we have budgeted $20,000 or I'm proposing $20,000, there's a good chance we might be able to get that much in funding. We'd get the plan done in fiscal 24 and then take a look at implementing in fiscal 25 and 26.
And then line, what is now 75 is our contingency line. And we have a flat 20,000 a year there, 5% of the 400,000. I would tell you most project contingency budgets are typically 10%. So this is, as I said in the assumptions, modest. But we feel you need something as a cushion.
And that
Okay,
can-
now is the time. I'm looking at him right now, Commissioner Kennedy. Commissioner Kennedy. Now is the time for you and your colleagues to have a discussion on what your priorities are.
And I've kind of kept track as we've gone through it. I've marked off what at least appears to me to be the ones that are necessary.
Can you say that again?
Marked off the ones that at least appear to me, based on the discussion and based on what we've been told, the ones that appear to be more necessary right now. I can just list them out in.
Please.
Okay, so, rebuilding the Public Works garage, it's condemned.
Can you start at the top and go down?
I can try.
Oh, you didn't do it that, okay.
I,
Well, then just go slowly, so.
yeah, sure. Well, if I was to start at the top, the generators seem to be pretty necessary. The camera pole, sounds like there was a lot of support for that.
You can go just a little slower.
Yeah, sorry.
Apologize.
Oh, instead of I thought you were gonna say, Jonathan, I thought you were gonna say needed as opposed to want.
I think most of these are needs. Ones, again, just the ones I've listed here. I think most of the ones that I've tried to keep track of seem to be needs.
I didn't think the poll cameras were a need. I think it's a great idea,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's a need.
That makes,
But I think the generator's a need.
I think so.
Are both generators in need really at the same level, police versus recreation? Not to be flippant, but
I think it's, I would think that it is.
Because one is they run the place
Like-
while we're in an emergency situation, and the rec center that's community access, that's helping people outreach for the community.
makes sense.
We're not gonna come over here and have people get water and sandbags from the police department.
The generator for the police, Chris, does that cover also City Hall?
Yes,
Okay, so.
the entire building.
Ah,
That generator keeps government functioning.
So that's already 40 right there,
Makes
just between those two.
Okay, so I'm sorry, start again. So you're saying the needs are emergency generator starting at public, police and public safety.
Right.
Okay.
I not trying to, but I might be jumping around a little bit. This is just the order in which I was writing them down. I categorized the traffic study, the $25,000 match as a need.
Yes.
There's another, that's the 25. Again, I apologize, I might be out of order here, but, the 30,000 for the roads, I saw as a need. And I'm
$30,000 for the roads?
correct.
What,
You start road repair.
like
Where
potholes?
are you at?
'Cause you can't even,
That's-
you're not gonna be able to pave one road for $30,000.
Well, then I'll ask. the
So,
manager
so
if
is
he
it
provides
just
What-
potholes to clear, to?
That's in our regular budget.
If,
Because you can't, for $30,000, you can't pave one road.
no, we can't pave a whole road. That $30,000 can either be used to do, like I'd mentioned, this stretch out here in front of the log cabin, or I think a better use.
One of the other things that Chris and I talked about is actually bringing somebody in to assess the condition of all your roads. Okay, to do some core drilling, in different locations around the village to determine what you actually have and what your future needs are going to be. That would help us to tighten up the numbers for the future and help us to better prioritize in what order roads should be done.
And I know you like to talk a lot about liability, and so one of the things that I know that municipalities have a certain level of liability when it comes to sidewalks. What about the fact that, well, first of all, we don't have sidewalks. People walk on the streets, and our streets are, with natural speed bumps, like the lady said earlier. So what is our liability factor in that? Oh,
Had the same question.
Yeah.
See what happens.
I guess that's a question for Brad, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you catch that, Brad?
I did. Is the question, what is the liability that you don't have sidewalks?
No. So municipalities that have sidewalks have a certain level of liability
Correct.
to maintain them, obviously. If people trip, fall, hurt themselves. Since we don't have sidewalks, we have roads, we have streets. And our streets, you know, with all the roots and all the holes and
Where people walk.
where people walk, what, is there a liability factor here for us, as a village?
Well, potentially, yes, since the roadways are being used for pedestrians as well as vehicles. So I guess the answer is potentially, but it's a little bit different because the sidewalks are specifically designated for pedestrians. And if there's a known defect that the municipality is aware of that is reasonably likely to cause an injury, that's where the liability comes. So I think there is a potential liability, but it's different than if you were to have sidewalks.
Yeah, but
It was there for that purpose.
right, no, I get it. But because we don't have sidewalks, right, folks are forced to walk on our
They're
streets,
running.
right? Or even on our medians, right? So Brad, can you just look into that a little bit? Just out of curiosity and see what kind of level of risk we're assuming with our streets and the conditions that they are.
I had here on roads, the way I was thinking about it is just dividing it in three sections. I mean, this is a huge project. The first one has to do with all the drains that are going to be added. So we have five phases. They're going to cover many corners of Biscayne Park. Those eventually will be destroyed and redone.
As part of the numbers we're seeing here, yeah?
Correct. So this is already in a way budgeted for phase 1 and 2, but it's going to continue to happen. So there is a long-term plan for this already. And if I were to grab in a Google map, mark those will be done eventually via grants, hopefully, because that's how we've been able to do it so far. We have a precedent. I would assume that would continue to happen. That's what we need to do. We will continue to ask for the money. The second bucket are the roads that are in urgent repair, and they're not part of the drain project. So there are streets that are literally eaten down to the grain. I mean, they have no asphalt or potholes. There could be potentially also liability. So those would be that would be my second bucket. That same idea. How can we go for money for those? Is there additional grants that we can ask? If not, what's the list? Literally list those key emergency streets that have never been addressed. If we were never going to get $1, how much would it cost, right? And so if the idea is to bring an engineer to tell us that, then there will be a bucket of 20 streets, and then we would assess the cost. And this third bucket was roads that need maintenance. They are not urgent and will not be part of the drain project, like tree roots damaging asphalt at the rec center, potholes specifically. I mean, this is not an urgency because you can still, drive through them, but there's certain areas that might need retouch. This is something that we can take on with Public Works. This is something that we cannot touch. It has to be done by a vendor. So those were the three. The way I see it, this is a massive project for us to fund. Clearly, this is not budget we own and we have. So we have to divide and conquer.
Yep.
So sort of first bucket is going to come. We already have it in the plan. What's second and third? That's my question. So building a plan internally. I'm not talking about hiring. I'm talking about Public Works bringing a list of, these are 10 streets. They're eaten literally, there's just dirt.
Yep.
And then those will be emergency. And then the third bucket, these are all the remaining ones that would need to be addressed. I don't know what you guys think.
I like the way you categorize things. And I want to add to that. Let's just pretend that tomorrow the county came to us and said, we're going to convert you to septic to sewer and it's this many years, blah, blah, blah. Chris, do I understand correctly that conversion from septic to sewer would also include storm drains? So now we would have storm drains as part of this, and no?
No, two totally different systems. Septic to sewer, there's a storm sewer system and there's a septic sewer system. On the storm sewer system, For oversimplifying is pipes that go underneath and over to the canal. The septic system, it's kept totally separate than that, and that goes to the wastewater
plant.
treatment plant. The reason those two things are separate is if they were combined, every time we had a major rainfall, that would completely overwhelm the sanitary sewer, and we'd have sewage in the streets.
So-
that happens now in some jurisdictions.
So our septic to sewer would require digging up the streets and repairing them the same way that our drain projects now incorporate road repairs at the same time.
Yes, to a
Yes.
larger degree. Our current, there were just a couple stretches of roads that were done with the previous storm drain projects. It wasn't, by any means, it wasn't all of the storm drains that included some of that street repair. A septic to sewer is going to include much more. It's going to be much more broad.
We would get all new streets as part of that, and that would include streets that we already spent money on to put our own storm drain, our own drains in.
Potentially, yeah.
We'd be spending money on drain, and I'm not suggesting we shouldn't move forward with our drains, but I'm saying, in essence, we would have spent money on drains
Potentially.
that then would be coming, then the roads would be redone as part of the septic to sewer.
Yeah, I think a good way of looking at that is we're not spending the storm drain money on roads that may potentially be ripped up and redone. We're spending that storm drain money on drainage.
Would they, and I know this is probably, I'm gonna guess this is a case by case basis. If they came in and did septic to sewer, are they gonna have to rip up the drains that we put in? Would our drains be in their way of doing that?
I can't even begin to answer that.
So you don't,
The answer is
Commissioner,
probably
you
yes.
don't have an integrated stormwater system. What you're putting in, my understanding, are catch basins, which are meant to be intermediate holding cells of sort. So they shouldn't.
But they're there, and my question is, they're there, I went up and looked at them in front of David's house. There's this huge thing underneath the road, and now if, David's house is gonna be connected to a sewer line that goes down the middle of the street, is it gonna impact the work? Not that it matters for today's conversation, I'm just curious. Does it mess up the drain that was put in his street?
So if I can jump in to answer that, that's very difficult to answer because a lot of it depends on how deep the French drains go and how deep they're going to bury the sewer lines. How deep they bury the sewer lines depends on the length, the run that they have to go, and the elevation underground of the connectors and things like that. It
understand.
could run right through the middle of them, in which case, yeah, it destroys it.
Using David's house as an example, you
Yeah.
have two storm drains on either side.
Uh-huh,
Middle.
and a giant pipe.
Middle, you have.
Exactly.
What are those manhole things? I guess they're connected, right?
Yeah.
If they go down the middle of that road, that's gonna be.
There's a
destroyed.
gigantic pipe that goes from corner to
That
corner.
will be destroyed.
That's the way Mario.
Well,
is.
it
what
all
really-
depends at what elevation one is versus where the other one's gonna go.
Yeah, it just
So you
kind
could
of,
go under or above it,
it'd be
depending.
nice to, my point is, it'd be nice to know,
Well, It'd be nice to know.
know what's gonna happen if septic and sewer is not gonna happen for 30 years.
They would
I'd love to
repair
know.
it,
Yeah, well,
Destroyed it.
Yeah.
That would be,
Yeah.
that would be nice to know, right?
To that point, I can say generally speaking, if they're going to incorporate anything like that into the septic to sewer project. So if the lines that they need to run, if they have to do any work that's going to destroy an existing French drain system, they will build in repairing that to the project.
Okay, so you, on this point specifically, you're suggesting adding for 2024, $30,000
Correct.
started.
Yep.
So for me, I wouldn't necessarily want to move forward with the engineering of everything, because I think that's what you were suggesting. Either we moved forward with an engineer that addresses which ones need to be, or you just start fixing the trees and the little things, right? So I'm more inclined to the second without really understanding the details of this. But I'm saying I'd rather start identifying in the different buckets that I mentioned. So to see how much would it cost? 30,000 not necessarily seems a lot of money for roads, which is amazing. But it might be that the third bucket I mentioned, which is the least urgent or the easier to fix, it's 150. I don't know.
And Commissioner, the assessment that we briefly discussed earlier would probably eat up to 30 before you're able to do any repair,
Yeah.
but then set you up to spend the 200 or 400 or 600 in subsequent years.
And let me ask you, so that would also open if we were to assign a vendor to the point you made earlier about an engineer will give you ideas and plans, that then you can capitalize on to go get grants funding.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Now, Chris might come back to you and say, hey, I've tested this out in the market and we really need 50,000 for it.
Yeah.
You know, you might need to go back, revisit and reprioritize something to make that happen.
Yeah.
But you know that you need to do it.
Do what specifically you're
Do-
referring
do
to?
Your assessment,
The assessment.
correct?
So it might cost more than 30,000, you're saying?
It's hard to say. That was an educated guess, but we don't know for sure until we actually test the market.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you're a small enough jurisdiction that 30 actually should cover it, but
Yeah.
you know, we can't guarantee that right now.
So this was number one priority for the community in general, right?
Yes.
This came out like the number one concern everybody talks about. We want to see roads fixed. So that's why I'm saying 30,000 doesn't seem a lot of money. Now, whether it's to pay for an engineer, you know, that addresses the entire village, doesn't seem to be that bad if we can use it for grants later on.
Correct. And what we're doing, Commissioner, just to make it clear, is that we're setting it up for an assessment to set you up for subsequent years where 50% of your CIP funding in this plan is allocated to road repair.
Yeah.
So that's a significant investment and a significant commitment that matches the community's number one priority.
I'd be interested to see if, where we find some additional monies within this budget, if, based on prioritization. So maybe it's something that we just talk about in a minute and kind of continue to go down to see what we see or what we deem is more necessary right now, and then come back to it. Because I would be interested to see which of these things maybe don't make that list and kind of free up those funds. So just quickly to look back, I think we've talked about the Public Works garage, the generators, the traffic study, and I think that's kind of where we stalled out. Does that sound about right?
How much was the garage?
120?
I'm sorry. Where do we get that 120,000? Did you get that 120,000 estimate from whom?
For which project?
The garage.
Public
The
Works.
the Butler Building project.
Yeah, that's an estimated cost for the deconstruction. That's based on the current market conditions.
Okay, but I mean, you haven't actually gotten a price. What is it that we're trying to build there? Is it a concrete thing? Is it a?
It's most likely going to end up being like I think the size that we had was 30 by 80. Most likely metal structure. So we have to rip up the existing concrete pad, put down new concrete, demolish the old garage, of course, put in this full garage. We're going to have to run electrical. We're going to have to put an HVAC. And then the doors, we may look at doing something like a work area in there as well to maintain. The best frame of reference I have is a pole shed on the farm. I know that probably doesn't mean much down here.
What was it? A what?
A pole shed on the farm.
I don't even know what that is.
That's, yeah.
You might have seen commercials.
In a movie?
It's a prefabricated structure, right? We're not really
Yeah.
building anything. You've seen commercials for these on TV.
If you say so.
But Commissioner Gonzalez, I do have some breaking news. The manatee signs are up.
Who?
The manatee signs.
Oh, Maida, you did something positive. That's great. That's awesome.
There you go.
And a pick. Hey, I have a question for you, Chris. You probably said this and I missed it somehow. The under Parks and Rec electric design project, that is for what?
Electric design project was something the previous commission, perhaps you guys decided on, that is analyzing the current electrical structure at Parks and Rec with the idea of putting in solar
Solar.
and or a generator.
It was the preparation for us to go solar.
We need to know what we have exactly.
Yeah, we approved that.
Which line are you in, Mac?
36 Parks and Rec, I believe, is the first yellow line.
First yellow one. Huh? So what are we doing? We running down here and each telling it, giving our opinion on stuff? Is that?
Yeah, I think we might as well. I think we've kind of gone, I think we've covered all the ones up to that point so far.
So if
Unless
I
I'm
can,
leaving any out. Other than,
Go over the needs and then.
that's, I think,
Those are
part
the
of what we're
needs.
doing, going down the list,
Oh, we're still going down the list again.
identify
Well,
those things.
Let me suggest an alternative
Yes,
that might be a little shorter.
Okay,
Okay, rather than everybody going through each item and saying what they think, it might be more time effective if individuals just identified items that they didn't support or didn't want in the 24 budget. Okay, so the assumption is everything else, I'm supportive enough to leave it in to varying degrees, but leave it. And here's what I have concerns about and I want to reprioritize. So that way you don't have to go through each thing and.
But that doesn't give us the ability to pull something up that wasn't put on the list already.
No, you can at that. You absolutely can. So that's part and parcel of it.
Can we jump briefly just to the totals and the bottom and just make sure that we walk through that and understand that properly?
Yeah, because the totals changed now that we took out the moving of the log cabin, right?
Okay, well, just then high level, like, I mean, we have contingency, we have total project funding needed, 3 million, possible grant funding, that's the ones highlighted in blue, right? Obviously. Enumerated other funding, on the prior version, the 1.05 million. What is, what's adding up to that 1.05?
That is fiscal 23 allocated. That is the things listed in the existing budget. So pickleball, for example, was listed as $90,000. So it includes those two things.
So it's the yellow, no, it's not the yellow items. 'Cause it's-
Some of the items are yellow, some are not. So that number specifically includes the resident communication systems update.
So, all right, so the 1,058 is prior year's funding or things that we already have funding for. That's how you're backing into the 1.034.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. I couldn't understand the flow of that.
Gotcha.
1.034 is the 3.006 minus the 912 minus the 1.058. You get to the proposed CIP funding of 677 we have a gap of 358.
Yep, and that's actually, I can drop that by 280 if the commission decides that moving the cabin isn't an option.
Yeah,
Don't think so,
got it.
The 280.
unfortunately.
Moving the.
It's actually more.
Oh, right.
It is more.
It's more, right? 80 is not.
It is. That's sounded low end.
80 gets us almost 80% towards closing the gap. Okay.
What's 357 minus?
We're now to 70,000 is what we had to come up with for everything that's already listed that we just talked about.
Now, Chris, can we clarify, that includes storm drainage phase 2, and what's our grant assumption on that? Because I think that's part of that 7.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
the best guess that I have is either 400,000 or 800,000.
That's going to be covered?
Yep.
That's,
And I have absolutely no way of even guessing which direction that's going to go. They could come back and it could be vetoed.
I'm just pointing that out because that's
Sounds
really
bad.
driving the rest of the deficit.
Does it,
One?
It's line 53, roadway drainage improvements, phase 2. 951.
Right, that's what we call a BFN in corporate planning. I'll let you guys figure out what that. BFN. Big something number.
okay, does that also include, there was a duplicate entry here for log cabin roof and walkway. It was $35,000 under admin and also 77 under Parks and Rec.
Yeah, that's already pulled out on mine.
Already pulled out on this total, okay.
So what I would recommend, and correct me if I'm wrong here. I think it would be safe to assume we'll get something in appropriations. I would feel comfortable saying that something is probably going to cover the $70,000 that we're currently underfunded. Once that appropriation comes in, or once we find out what that's going to look like, we can absolutely revisit this. It's going to take some time to start kicking off some of these engineering projects, getting quotes together or proposals together, depending on what purchasing requires. So we have a little bit of time on this yet. I'd recommend just making that assumption that that's going to be covered.
Then if we assume that that's going to be covered, then outside of what we've already pulled, we fit within the CIP budget that's presented to us.
Correct.
But it doesn't mean we need to leave all the money allocated where it is.
Right, of course, of course.
Okay, so we're still gonna do the exercise of what we like, and what we don't.
I think we need to.
It's more of what you don't like and would like to either remove or reprioritize and what you'd like to add.
To that point, let me just say that if there is something that you quote don't like, unquote, you can bump that to future fiscals.
So it's either don't like or don't like right now.
Mhm.
Or don't like forever. Probably more likely.
So how would you like to start?
Just gonna open the floor and let anyone pick an item and say whether or not we want to discuss it, we want to support it.
Couple of quick level set questions again. When is this being voted on? I know, but what is the target date to have a vote to have this finalized?
There's nothing in the charter, I don't believe, Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, there's nothing in the charter requiring this, otherwise we would have already had it.
Yeah, there is.
What's that?
No, you're correct.
From my perspective, the sooner we have this adopted, the sooner that we can use the CIP to start applying for grant funding. I would say if we can get, it's going to depend entirely on what happens over the course of the next 2 hours. It's entirely possible that we could have this in front of you in March, more likely probably April.
And what you're gonna have in front of us is not for a vote. You're gonna put in front of us, this is what you guys, this is what, based on what I heard you guys say, this is what CIP looks like now.
Brad, what does the formal adoption process for a CIP look like down here?
All right, I'm gonna mute myself for a second. Well, at some point, you're gonna have to vote with regards to the approval of the projects themselves. But as far as the CIP, you're just going to, it's just gonna go before you. And it's gonna be similar to what we're doing now.
But then each project Chris will bring to us for approval.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, it'll
once, just to clarify, once you decide, yes, this is what we're gonna do, I don't come before you to say, okay, is it okay if I do pickleball now? I come to you and say, this was in the CIP, here's what we're looking at, what do you want to do now?
But first, you're gonna bring this back to us in a cleaned up form and say, guys, is this what you wanted? And we're gonna say, yes, that was not exactly right. We'll adjust it, whatever. And then you start bringing projects to us because we already approved it. We approved you to move forward with it. You bring it back to us to sign off on stuff.
Yep, as we get quotes or proposals.
So currently, everything you have on here, that you have a placeholder or is in theory budget, the money's there to cover all of these expenses, right?
Correct, asterisk.
Yeah.
Grant funding.
Of course, of course. I'm sorry, but which one exactly is the asterisk attached to?
The big one.
The big one.
The BFN.
Okay.
Yep. Well, actually, it's a little bit more. It's that, it is the solar, it is the median swales, green spaces. Yeah, and that's it. Oh, I'm sorry. In addition, the log cabin roof and ADA parkway, walkway.
Log cabin, roof and walkway as well. So that for grant this year, you're saying?
This fiscal, correct.
So my next question on that, because we're betting this is going to happen on this fiscal year. The cycles for grants, when would we apply and by when would we know?
Each grant is different. There isn't a set cycle. Depending on the source, it could be matching our fiscal year, so it might not open again until October. Most of the grants that I'm seeing from the feds and from the state they have set periods. It's not necessarily a fiscal year. So we could apply for something in July. We could apply for something in November.
For me, I say keep everything as is, and then as things come up, we vote and we say yay or we say nay, and that's it. That's how I would do it.
You're so easy.
Are you waiting for me to finish, Jonathan?
No, I'm just more or less just kind of open to see how we want to
I
address.
can run down real quick to him. I'm sorry, John, were you gonna start?
If,
Okay, go.
sorry,
Mine's going to be quick, which is that I would like to have a little bit more time to actually look at this and process. I mean, it's been a long day. It's 9 o'clock, almost 9 o'clock. I guess high level 35,000 feet, the thing that I want to be looking out for is if there's anything more that we can do, you know, contingent upon the answers that to the request that we put out to the chief and his team, anything that we can do in the short term to try and help mitigate some of the issues that we're dealing with public safety and speeding and traffic. I mean, I know we have things that long-term to do the study, grant funds coming, things like that. I mean, I know there's some money here, but to your point, you know, if we're approving things as is and they can shift some stuff around, I would maybe be in favor of shifting some things more towards that, even if they are short-term measures. I know not always great things to do with a capital plan, to do operating expenses out of a capital plan, but I mean, clearly everyone's very concerned about that right now. So I'm just going to make sure I keep an eye on that as we move.
That's a fair point.
The one thing I do want to say, if it is under $10,000, so looking at this list, I think only the license plate reader poll cameras. Possibly it, as soon as you all agree to this, I can move on anything $10,000 or less without coming to you to say, is it okay to spend this money? Just something to keep in mind.
Those are the only two, right? That in what Mac just mentioned, the
Rec center design.
rec center, which we
Yeah.
kind of already
Yeah.
decided that we want a little bit more specific detail before we approve that. But really, if we were to go forward with this as it's been presented, then that would kind of give you authority to go ahead with that.
Yep, those two items.
All right, Commissioner, were you done? Okay.
Yeah, I know there's a few items on here, some of the bigger ticket ones that I could see being moved, not necessarily canceled, so to speak, if that's the right word. But moved a year because, like the commissioner mentioned, I would like to see a little bit more investment with traffic. I would like to see a little bit more investment. Roads is an important one. I know that it's tough, because 30,000 is not going to get us much. Is another 90,000 going to get us much more? It's hard to say, but $90,000, if we were to say, I'm not saying that this is what we should do, but by way of example, if we were to say, let's take pickleball and move it to 25 instead of 24, take that 90 and put it towards roads, what does that get us? I mean, I think it gets us somewhere where we're not just saying, let's just plan for another year. Not to say that's a bad idea because it sounds like it's helpful, but it would be helpful to see some improvement now.
So if I may take the liberty putting on my former commissioner hat, one thing that I've done in the past is exactly what you've said. There are certain things that we can do now to take action, so we're doing something, while also taking the long-term planning approach. So for example, I'm not picking on pickleball, that's what you just mentioned. Absolutely, let's take the $30,000 and fix this road and then allocate that $90,000, or if we take it, something out of the Parks and Rec or what have you, and to start that planning process, we can do both those things at the same time to try to accomplish both those goals.
You next?
Yeah, please.
So I'm going to run down the list and make a couple of comments about things and bring some other things up. But first, I want to say a couple of things. October, November, December, January, February, we're almost 5 months through a 12-month fiscal year. There's 7 months remaining. Not getting done, so we need to be honest about that. I'm looking at all of us, not you. We're 5 months late on this. This is why shit doesn't get done. Pardon my French. I'm sorry if I offend anybody. We're 5 months late on this. We're talking about fiscal 24 priorities in the middle of February. We need to do better at this every year if we're here another year. So this exercise is a bit of an exercise in futility because of the timing of it. I really want us to look at some private funding, and I would love you guys to agree with me to take something from here and come up with a plan to fund it privately and try it. Maybe we'll fail. Maybe we'll fail. Maybe we'll succeed. But we have a foundation that has some really bright, hardworking people on it. They do nice things. I'd love to give them a project and say, the RFPs are in from pickleball and it's only $42,000. We need $42,000 and we want to get it done by the end of fiscal 25. The anti-pickleball people, I just picked that one off the list because it's easy. I really want us to do that, and we could take something out of here, pluck it out, go for it, and see how we do with that. Because if we could become good at that, that's something we could do every year. So I would like us to do that. And I'd like pickleball to maybe be discussed along those lines. Okay, emergency generator, absolutely. Under police, this traffic police thing that we talked about, Chris, at the last meeting, we're going to talk about again. I know it's not going to be part of this, but I really want that to, I don't want it because I don't know anything about it yet, but I really am hoping that could be something. And if this somehow got impacted by that, like that was possible, and we needed to use this money, to me, that would leap to the top of the list because it's something we could try and we could agree, we'll give it a 6-month shot, a 1-year shot, we'll see what it does. Because the police brought that to us as a solution. That wasn't any of us. We don't know what the hell we're talking about, just came up with this grand plan.
About the traffic officer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
The police
have a
came to
cost
that.
for that
We don't have the cost for it yet. Yeah. So I see that as a huge priority and I'm going to include it in this conversation because if that's a feasible thing to what John's saying, I think that should impact some of the things in here.
I'll disagree.
Okay. This rec center improvement thing, I don't even know what it is. I'm confused about it and I can't support that. And guys, this is what worries me. That's an $8,000 item that falls under the $10,000 threshold. He could go have someone go do that tomorrow. I'm not suggesting Chris is up to anything nefarious. I'm just saying that things that fall under that $10,000 threshold, John, in case you aren't aware, he can just go do it. Everything else comes to us for approval, right? That, I don't even know what that project is really all about. I need to know a whole lot more about that. So for me, that's a hard no for now until I know more about it. Okay. The water stations at public buildings. This is something that I brought. And we live in South Florida where it's like ridiculously hot a lot of the year. And we have people out on the streets, out and about, and a lot of them end up at the rec center doing a lap and then going on their way. Art, I see you doing it too, right? That to me is an amenity that I think would really improve things over at the rec center. I would like to hear some of you comment back when I'm done about that, because the idea of having maybe just starting with 1 or 2, one at each end, outside water stations where people can fill up water bottles, get a drink, and a thing at the bottom for dogs to get a drink as well. This is South Florida. And we're encouraging people to go out and about and walk and use our streets and our rec center. And we're talking about all these other things. We need to be providing water for people. I would like to see that one brought back to life. The emergency generator, absolutely. The solar prep stuff at the rec center, absolutely. The log cabin stuff here, my God, it's so late. The Ed Burke master plan, just to remind you guys, we already spent a whole bunch of money on that. So that one we got to keep moving forward with.
Which one, say again?
The Ed Burke master plan, the parking and everything. And the parking here's got to get done. This has got to get done. And we also spent money on that. The Public Works building, yeah, I wish it didn't cost $120,000. I wish there were ways to get that down, but it sounds like Chris already looked into that. Okay, so to traffic mitigation strategies. We have no money here because we're waiting for this traffic study to get done to help us make better choices. Fully support that. I've been saying that from day one. We can't operate here based on what we think. What the hell do we 5 know, right? About traffic mitigation. Experts tell you that stuff, and it starts with a study that's here, and I'm extremely happy about that. But to John's point, I think there are some things we might be able to do in the meantime. I would like to see some money in here or sorry, Janie, don't even think about speeding signs that campaign brought back to life here and have those signs all around the village. Chris is bringing that to us at the March meeting and we'll see a hard cost on that, but it didn't sound like it was going to be a lot anyway. Judy Fluke brought up a really good point. She lives on the street where that horrific accident was and there's no speed limit sign on that street. Yeah, I know, exactly. So I was not aware of that. And I think maybe we need to find out, are there other streets around here that don't have speed limit signs and things aren't posted properly? I think we need to get that done because it's, we gotta have speed limit signs up for goodness sake. So I would like to see signs brought back in here as a conversation in this, because I think that's an immediate thing we can do. And just, guys, we need to start showing them something on that topic. So I think signs are a good first step. I think this traffic enforcement detail or whatever we're calling it is another good first step until we get the study done. And upgrading to policing and other things that are not part of a budget. So Jonathan, if you're keeping tabs here, it's signs. I would like to see us discuss signs.
Oh, and I don't mean to interrupt your flow process here, but if I could just ask very quickly, Mr. Manager, within this list here, do we have kind of a general line item for traffic mitigation, things that where signage might fall under, or something that you brought up at our regular commission meeting was the blue and white flashing radar signs? You know, we were talking about getting a quote to maybe put more of those in, fix or move some of them. Something for that seems like it would fall within CIP. So is there a line item here where we might move some funds around where we say, well, we're not crazy about the $8,000 that it costs to do the design for the rec center. We want to reallocate that for signage and for the blue and white flashing. Where would that fall under?
What we could do with that is in the traffic mitigation strategies line,
41.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
plunk in $10,000 for this fiscal or whatever you think is a fair amount. I don't even have a rough guess on what those signs would be at this point, but we could put it in there.
But I think having something more there would be helpful as we identify them. We know that the traffic study is going to open the doors to better and larger things, but there are certain things that we talked about at the last meeting. We spent a lot of time talking about it. There are certain things that could fall within that line item that I think we should be able to attack.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we should drop money there in that empty cell, Jonathan. And I think it should be $100,000. Because that shows that we have intent to get some real stuff done. And we can go back in here, Chris can go back and dial back in some other things. And maybe the dog park doesn't have to be so elaborate. We'll have more information about the RFP very soon on the pickleball. But I'd be very happy to see under traffic mitigation strategies, $100,000, and know that it could be signs at the very least. And those flashing things, Chris, I keep forgetting what you call them, you know, things that fall into that general category. We've got to start taking steps here on this. And the study is going to lead us to much bigger, longer term solutions, but we've got to do something.
Yeah,
All
there
right,
are
so-
certain things.
So just
Let me,
point of clarification.
and then I have one. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can certainly put $100,000 in there for the traffic signs, but then it's up to you to tell me what isn't,
Where to
what we're
take
not gonna
Right,
do.
right,
Yeah.
of course.
Or to-
It has to be moved around because.
Yeah, exactly. I get it.
Of course,
I
yeah.
think the two easy places to do it are, for me, my turn to give my list, are dog park and pickleball. As much as I want dog park for certain, and I want to know more about pickleball, it's easy to say, yeah, and it might end up being one of those and not the other. You know, but money needs to end up in traffic mitigation. And right now we have a big fat zero there. So I'm going to move on. You heard my piece on that, and you guys are going to say yours, and then we'll go back and we'll change stuff.
Like we
Uh,
needed one big dog park. We
We
could
kind of
live
do.
without it for another year, potentially.
Yeah.
I've been here 20 years. I've always thought it was a nice thing to have, but.
And for 20 years, people have been talking about it.
But
But it would be nice, but it sure would be nice to say, we got it done, we got something done, and we can get lots of different things done. We can pick and choose, right? And maybe Chris will play with some numbers and he'll say, you know, guys, why don't you try to find private money for one of these things? And why don't you make it the dog park? Because Lord knows between vets and dog groomers and we should be able to raise some money. Okay, moving along.
Again, just to clarify that you tell me what
I
you
understand.
want to find private funds for. I'm not the best person to decide
Okay.
what to reach out to the community for.
Let me get mine done. You could do yours and then we're gonna hash all this out. Okay. I think that's it. I think that's it.
All right, so
I have some other, I'm sorry, just let me just look at something really quickly.
Commissioner, I wanted to point out to you one thing on line, looks like 31.
Give me a name. Give me a department and a name.
Line
please.
31, Parks and Rec,
Parks and
water
Rec.
stations.
Yeah.
So we do have the water stations in 25.
Yep, and I'd like to
I
see
didn't
that
know if
pulled
you saw
forward to
that.
24. Yeah.
So you want to move it forward to 24. That could be, given the dollar amount, that might be a really good target for your private fundraising,
Oh, there you go.
you
I
know,
like the
'cause
way you're thinking there.
it's
Alan.
that's an achievable number, I think.
How much can we put you down for?
You'd be surprised. We'll talk later. All right.
If I can just ask you one question, that $100,000 you want to put in that line, what do you, $100,000?
No, we're talking
about
about
the traffic.
signs, the traffic mitigation.
Traffic.
So what,
Jump around a lot, Joe.
what, yeah, what exactly are you seeing, that will cover that $100,000? What?
That it would pay, that it will use for?
Yeah.
Don't even think about speeding signs, any other signs that we're missing around the village or that we think should be added, slow down at curbs. All kinds of,
Costs $100,000.
no, and his flashing things, I have no idea how much those cost, the moving.
So there's a lot of information that we're still missing.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm just saying that, but look, a lot of these numbers are based on, so I'm just,
We're just missing a ton of information. We're missing.
understand.
All those costs. We're missing the
Yep.
cost of the police enforcement.
Yep.
We're missing the cost of what.
Pickleball, dog park.
Call it too much and we're not even gonna consider it. So there's just still a lot of missing information here.
But we have to decide on
We don't
some
have
stuff.
to do anything like that right this second.
Well, let me, gentlemen, I want to show you a number which will illuminate this conversation a little. Line under public safety, line 21, we have restrict select street access. Okay, so we didn't really talk about lines 20 and 21, and let me clarify this. So the original concept that maybe one or two people had talked about was shutting off access to all the streets, okay? And that's the big ticket number in line 20. Line 21, what Chris and I talked about as an alternative is that rather than shutting off access, you can make it very uncomfortable or difficult to drive through by creating one-way streets. But no, hold on, but not taking like two streets and making them one-way pairs. Like 2 blocks this way, and then the next 2 blocks are this way. So if I live in the neighborhood, I know that
You know how to get out, but.
you know how to get in and out, but somebody who wants to pass through the community, it's gonna be gosh darn hard to do it, depending on what you do.
Is that the kind of thing that the traffic study would?
Yes,
Bring
Yes.
about as a recommendation?
yes, it would.
That is
But
a lot more.
Part of my
whole-
concern is that we're gonna pay for a traffic study to tell us what we are.
No,
We already
agreed.
know where the freaking
Agreed.
problems are.
I'm not advocating this right
Solutions
now.
As well.
I was giving you background on something because there's a dollar figure there, and the dollar figure, to your question, is that we actually did a little homework and came up with sign installation, $350 a sign. Okay, and so that 35,000 covers 100 signs. And we didn't think you'd ever want to put in that many to begin with, because now you're starting to talk about visual pollution. I wanted to give you some context
Understood.
to your conversation here
Look,
about.
the other
100,000.
reason thank you.
Yep.
And the other reason why the 100, because there's so many unknown things. But it also makes a statement that we have intent here to get something done and we can dial back from other places to do it. And his flashing things, I want to learn more about too. We don't have prices on that. And there could be other things that we think of that could be done in the meantime. I want us to have the ability to do stuff when other ideas come up for short-term traffic mitigation solutions while we wait for the study. Because the study's going to happen when, Chris?
Yes,
And we're hoping the next 18 months.
yeah, it's completely up to the grantors.
Yeah, so it's not going to happen until fiscal 25, and then we don't wiggle our nose and everything changes the next day. Then it's a years-long process to get things done. We need to get some things done, and we need money in there to do it. So at any rate, I'm done. Those are my comments.
All right, actually,
Yeah.
I'll point out a couple of things after you're all.
Okay, so I'll start with mine. So I'm gonna go from the top down as well. Emergency generator, at least 20,000, yes. The camera, yes.
Commissioner,
Yes.
let's focus on your nose. So if you like something, we're.
Basically, no, what I'm saying no to, yes. Okay. So I would like to leave the $90,000 that currently stay for the pickleball.
Okay.
Contingent of the implementation plan for traffic. So that's a little bit of everything I've heard my fellow commissioners talk about. It's about additional police needed. It might be the signage that we talked about. I'm not pro of the sign, so don't not even think about speeding. That's me. But if there's speeding sign that were missing, if there's stop flashing signs that were missing, I'm happy to include those within the context. And now we have an estimate on what those picables might be, around $90,000. So I'm saying no, potentially. I'm not saying no to pickleball at all, but if prioritizing is the game of we're talking about today, I would have to assume that's where the money would come from. For the rest, everything is a yes, including the $8,000 that you have for recreation. I would just also would ask Chris to have that sort of clearance in terms of what's being done from the foundation and what it's actually being requested, because it's not very clear. And that's it. I think the rest I'm on board. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything else. Or the other generator. Oh, traffic mitigation, same thing. So I had filled it up, but that would go with the 90,000 I just spoke about. And then when it comes to the roads, it's a yes as well to start somewhere in the plan and design with what we can get done this year or as soon as possible. Yep.
Mayor, were you done with your list?
I've kind of been all over the place, so I apologize. I'm not trying to be. I generally tend to agree that we need more money for the traffic mitigation efforts. And I think if we just move, remember, pickleball was not just pickleball. We categorized pickleball, the money there, to also be recreational upgrades. So it's a broad category, but I would agree that I think just moving it to fiscal 25 and using that money for traffic, I think is important. And quite honestly, the 63 for the dog park, again, I don't want to see that removed. I'd like to see it moved to the next fiscal, and I'd like to see that 63 put down for roads.
And to keep in mind, we're only talking about another 6 months at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like we're not pushing it off a year.
I just
We're
think
already
that
halfway
I
through.
think I just think there needs to be some more money and more investment in traffic and roads. I think those are two very big issues, and I think they can come from those two projects just by moving them to a 6-month down the road type of arrangement. So I would
Or-
agree with that.
Attorney has something to share.
Yeah, if I may, just real quick, I just want to correct something I said earlier. So I was just doing a little bit of research. So your CIP will ultimately be approved by resolution.
Yeah, okay.
So
Thank you,
we would
Brad.
have to come back to a meeting and you would approve the CIP as through by resolution.
I was imagine by that time, like you were saying, it's more likely to be April. It's very likely that we will have some more information on several of these things where we'll get RFPs, we'll get quotes coming in, so we'll have some more granular data.
Correct.
Help guide our decision on.
And to that point, Jonathan, Chris comes back to us in March. He's going to have these two traffic things that we asked for. He might have information about pickleball because we don't even know if we got any. We don't even know if we got any responses. And that closes between now and the March meeting. He may be reporting back to us things that my question to you, Chris or Brad, is could we at the March meeting give you more input that would allow you to tweak it some more before you bring it back to us in April? If you came back to us in March and said, here are the prices for these things, and we didn't get any RFPs for pickleball, or it's $150,000, and we say, okay, then we may not have to make that exact call here tonight. He can move forward and work on this, and between now and then, we'll get better information, right?
Yeah, regardless of what happens, even if we get 3 perfect quotes or 3 perfect bids for pickleball, you can say, nope.
Alan, you mentioned something about $35,000 for 350 signs or something like that.
No, that's for 100 signs.
I'm sorry, for 100, sorry,
Right.
for 100 signs. And that's in here as well already, right?
Well, not for this fiscal year.
Oh, not for this year.
No,
When
sir.
is- Oh, I thought you
Use that as an
No,
example of how much signs cost.
We actually
okay,
have
okay.
that
I
in
got you.
in 26 and 27
Yeah.
as an alternative
Mhm.
after the traffic study is
Yeah.
done.
So listen, guys, for me, I'm not ready to make any major decisions based on the fact that we are still simply missing a lot of information. Listen, I would be all 100% in for removing the whole pickleball, which by the way, came from residents. It wasn't my idea, but anyway, regardless. if I knew what the cost was for adding a police officer you know, if it's $300,000 or 200, I don't know what those costs are, so I'm not ready. So there, when I have the information that's currently missing, I'll be more than willing to engage and suggest different things. But right now, for me, I'm not ready to make any big changes in what's currently proposed.
All right, so let me tell you that there's only a few things really. Notwithstanding everything that you all talked about, there's really only a few things that I see we might want to get some clarification on now, and I want to make a clarifying statement. You all seem pretty keen on the idea of at least one traffic officer. So that would be a recurring expense added to your operating budget. And the 400,000 a year that we're talking about would have to be reduced unless there was another way you came up with those monies. Okay, for at least for planning purposes of this plan. And I'm not saying that to throw water on it. I'm just letting you know that if that's a direction you're going in, and it seems like you're strongly going in that direction, that's going to dramatically change these numbers. We're going to have to meet with the chief, hear what he has to say, come up with a number, and then adjust this year and subsequent years appropriately.
And to that point, I think that's why we might have to have a candid conversation to make sure that we're doing the very best that we can with what we already have in terms of our utilization of the current force. And I'm just speaking from what I see.
And you know what, Commissioner, I'm going to share with you an anecdote. When I got elected mayor, so many moons ago, this was an issue for my community. And I went to the chief and I said, what do we need to do? And he said, oh, well, we got to hire X number of officers. And I said, no. I said, I need your guys to get out there. And back then it was guys, but I hired women. And we were able to double actually almost triple, excuse me, the amount of traffic tickets that the force was writing with the existing staff that we had. So.
Okay, what was the secret sauce? I think we'd love.
No,
to
the
hear.
secret sauce was just
I'm gonna fire you. That's a secret sauce.
prioritizing what they were doing, making sure that they were, you know.
We,
I'm an expert, it's not near and dear to my heart, like the gentleman who was here at the commission meeting, but I mean, look, they stick out like sore thumbs and they are not, you know, when I was a bad driver in my teens and 20s, I learned from consequence. I learned from getting tickets and having my insurance go up. That's what teaches people. We learn, you know, when you're, that's what works. And, you know, I don't, your point, if the tickets could be doubled or tripled, I think just by how we do things. I mean, they do stick out like sore thumbs. They're not hiding behind bushes. They don't seem to be doing a lot of, I could speculate why. We could all speculate why. Maybe they want to confront speeders who, I'm sure there's a correlation between people who speed and maybe you're engaging in other criminal activities. I'm sure there's people who would rather shoot a police officer and kill him on the spot rather than take a chance of having to be arrested for, you know, moving.
And so
I understand, but so to your point, I think maybe there are some other things we can do other than hire police.
And so that ties into the whole sign situation, right? So if we put signs in every corner and every block and police officers aren't enforcing, then you just wasted your breath and your signs and all your, and whatever. So it goes back to enforcement, you know. I don't like the signs. I think they're not inviting or welcoming or anything. But the amount of disrespect there is people driving in this city, I'm okay if we offend them. I'm okay with that. The issue is that
We're offending people that are cutting through our village.
that has to tie in with enforcement, because if
I
not,
agree,
there
and
is,
that's why
useless.
that's why I said both.
Yeah, so we
Like
have to talk
this,
about
it's like
both things,
this.
right?
That's right.
Can I ask a question? I got a bit confused with the comment you made. So are you saying when you said majority of you seem to be heading towards the idea of hiring more? What exactly give you that note? Like what exactly, where are we at in specifically money to hire more police?
No, I'm basing it on the comments that I heard your colleagues make.
We're waiting for information.
waiting, yeah.
No one has said, no one is supporting that except in theory only.
Okay, that was going to be my point.
Yeah.
I mean, the chief came with an amazing presentation. It was very successful in addressing a lot of the concerns. that needs to be materialized in a budget proposal, what the impact is, what the solutions could be, and a lot of that we already spoke about. So I just wanted to clarify, because at the end, we don't know what it might look like. And it's a little bit of everything I think we talked about. It's like a 360 sort of thing we got to look into. All right, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't saying yes to something that had to do with
No.
hiring. It's just, we
No,
don't know yet.
the original intent of making the point that I did is that officers are not cheap.
Yes.
And one officer with benefits is gonna run
Of
you,
course,
what-
it's a lot of money.
$110,000.
okay? And so, and if, right, that's one officer, and I don't know how many the chief is suggesting.
Correct.
So I just wanted you to be mindful.
So
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I have to jump on my soapbox real quick here. Every time I hear this, we cannot go to a point where we're gauging success on the number of tickets written. Just blanket statement. The success is measured by other things such as a reduction in speeding or things along those lines. Counting tickets is what got Biscayne Park into a lot of trouble. So just
Yes.
I'm off my soapbox.
Same way you don't measure code success by how many violations they write.
Yeah.
It's by how good the village looks.
This is information that is still
And
forthcoming.
also quotas for tickets are a violation of state law.
So we have a half an hour left. What are the next steps? How do we wrap it?
Well, we've gotten a lot of comments from you. We're on tape, so we're gonna listen to them again. I've taken notes as well. What I see, what I'm hearing is general support for most of what we have. Pushback pickleball, not get rid of it, but push it back. The same with the dog park, push it back, not get rid of it. And
Well,
the-
I'm up for bidding. It's currently, it's
Yeah.
allocated for fiscal year 2024.
Yeah.
right,
Right?
so I'm saying push it back,
you
if it
said
gets
push
pushed
back.
back to 25
And
or,
reallocate
or
those
whatever, and
It just depends on some variables that we're just missing information.
exactly, okay?
So I
and-
wouldn't
and
say
then-
we
and
agreed
then-
to push any,
Well,
I didn't feel like we agreed to push anything back. We're waiting for more information. Like we have an RFP coming in for pickleball that could tell us a lot that would cancel it all together or push it back or let it move forward. We don't know because we don't know. And we have prices on things we're waiting for. So
all
I
right.
didn't hear us agree to push anything back.
No, I didn't say you agreed. I said, this is what I'm hearing
Mhm.
and
I
what
didn't hear that either.
And what I heard also,
Heard it from him.
and what I heard also is that take those monies and reallocate them to signage, for traffic signage, reallocate it for road repair. Those are the two things that kind of rose to the top in the discussion. That seemed to be more pressing priorities for this year than those other two higher ticket items.
I thought do we have some kind of a consensus on this money being spent at the rec center for the design? It was $8,000.
I said yes for that, as long as I know where it's going.
We don't, and
how it
again,
is.
we don't know the information. So I
Correct.
feel like
A lot of these things,
there's
that's
a
what we-
whole lot of things we need to fill in a whole bunch of gaps and then we could do this again, maybe. Can we do this at a commission meeting?
Oh,
We're gonna have to, because we have
And
to
in
pass by
March,
resolution.
Could it be on the agenda? Well, it'd be easier the next time, because then if he has things that he drops in, it could be much faster. There's less discussion. We already kind of know where we stand on stuff.
I think so.
I don't think it's realistic that we'll get through this in a, listen, we've been here almost 4 hours.
Let me,
But we
let
will be
me,
hashing through everything.
let me add just this, because this relates directly to what you're trying to accomplish and avoid. When is the special runoff election? And I'm asking because I think the last thing you
9th.
guys want is to get near a point of agreement, near a point of being able to move on. And then I leave, someone else comes in and they play their card and say, all right, I don't know anything about this. Let's start from scratch. And there's going to be a collective, oh,
All in favor?
right. So when is the special election again?
April 9th.
Does that mean that we have a March that I will be here for?
You'll be here for the April meeting.
April. Okay, so it's not like it has for us to be able to vote on this. It has to be March. It could be April. Give us a little bit of breathing.
April 9th, you're not here anymore. April 10th, you're not here anymore. depending on when it gets certified and all of that, but
When is
you're-
that April commission meeting?
it's a Tuesday, April 9th.
So a lot of this is already on, that's what, a lot of it is already ongoing, and some of this pending can come next month. And that's where I wanted, as a next step, I wanted to ask Chris, how do you see feasible, Chris, maybe for next month, having some of these things kind of cleared up? For me, is the $8,000 for the rec center, for example, sort of estimate dates for the bidding of the dog park. I mean, these are included on this fiscal, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're included. And to answer your question, I'm going to ask a question, and that's what are my priorities? Because I can't get, it's not possible to get the level of detail on all of these items. My hope walking out of this was the priorities. So if you're telling me that a dog park is a high priority, that stuff I can go out and get the information for. If you're telling me that the rec center is a priority, I can go out and get quotes for the designers to come out, for example.
What I'm hearing,
Yeah.
and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the rec center, the dog park, and the pickleball thing are all items of interest, but are questionable because they're lacking information. Most of everything else that's on there seems acceptable, although I'm hearing they'd like to have a little more certainty on the Public Works building, if we can nail that down a little more. But the focus should be on those three items to get the commission additional information.
And getting money in traffic mitigation.
So that was gonna be my next question, Mac, and maybe what we do is because we had an overage before we came in here today and we got under or within striking distance of the budget of the number. Do we just earmark it at 100 and then come back when we have some more
I think
detail?
that's what I was proposing earlier.
I see what you're
100 in there for now.
But what I heard that, and that's why I gave you the sign information, because I also heard Commissioner Gonzalez say, hey, 100,000 seems like a lot. Are we really going to have something to spend that on? And 100 signs would cost you 35,000, not 100,000. Are you really even going to put up 100 signs? So, and that's the point I'm making is
What you're making is
kind of,
reduce
we'll,
it.
we'll kind of, maybe we'll come back to you with 50 or 60 sign number and plug that in along with everything else to address that.
Yeah, because we got a different, I know it was a total guesstimate, but we came up with this number of $20,000 for the signs at the last meeting, when we asked Chris to come back and for the don't. think
But it wasn't just signs. We also talked about the flashing.
The radar.
Yeah,
Radar.
it was about the.
We
But
don't
the
know.
number that we threw out there was 20,000 just for those others that don't think about speeding signs. It wasn't, didn't include the flashing stuff.
Right, what I'm saying is we don't know the cost of that.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying is he's gave us one round
Right,
number and
right,
I'm
right.
saying
We have an idea. of
we had
what-
heard a different round number before.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
$400 per sign roughly. for
Exactly.
the-
That's what it was in 20.
Whether it says 25 miles per hour, whether it says don't think about speeding, whether it says parking, it's roughly $400 a sign and sign.
Right, so $400 a sign, and you were saying how much?
350.
350.
Oh, okay.
And that's including the concrete, you know.
Oh, I see. That number is split across 2 years. That's why it was 16 and 17. I get it. Okay, I got it.
Yes.
So
That's why the math was wrong.
your question was, what do I start with?
Exactly.
And I think this is where, you know, there's certain things that are already ongoing. So some of this you already have, and all the yellow portion disappears because you're working on it. It's the other stuff that has not been started. So emergencies are
Generators.
I mean, the generator has not been an emergency until now. I'm saying for him next month. He literally is saying, what's my priority for next month? I think traffic, we all agreed, is where we need more clarification about whether it's 100, 150. To be honest, we don't know. So it's, what's the process to get a proposal from police department in terms of what's the impact financially for all the suggestions that we discussed last time? And having that in hand, then we are able to say, well, pickleball already came in, it was 670. What do we do? And I think that's number one priority. I don't know if you guys agree to have that in writing. And then and to me, it's the public work, the building. I mean, you have a condemned building, currently has temporary storage. but that process needs to get started. So same thing, I think there is a bidding process to get started on before the season of the hurricane season gets here, before all the storms gets here. It's combined with the generator, so I think it's the same package than that. The rest is third tier. I don't know if you guys agreed. I mean, it's a dog park, the rec center, those are
Other than the planning things he's kind of already.
great things to have that the community has spoken about, but those are like urgent for the next month or so.
All right, so what I'm hearing then, and make sure my notes are correct, we need more information on the dog park. We have more information coming on pickleball. You want more information on the rec center? That's the piece I'm unclear on. Do you need the information on how much it's going to cost to have a consultant come in, or do you want me to have a consultant come in and tell us?
No,
For me, it was very clear. No,
They first want information
What is it?
on what specifically
is
is
needed.
being proposed.
what is needed? Was there a leak through the walls with their kitchen not working? That's why it's needed. And then the comparison with what the foundation is doing. I think that's a list to put next to each other.
And then add to that list, Chris, the chief's traffic
Yep,
proposal.
that'll be coming with the
Right.
March meeting.
Chief's
Um,
traffic proposal.
Officers.
And then the other priority issues, Public Works Building, we can go and get the bids on that, not a problem. The flashing signs, prices,
Part of the traffic mitigation proposal.
and then we'll start the process or put the proposal out for generators.
I think you need to also specify how many signs we're looking at, Chris. I mean, you're gonna have different kinds of signs. Obviously, you're gonna have speed limit signs in streets now that we know don't even have speed limits.
Well, we know of one.
We know of one.
I'm guessing, extrapolate that. There's probably others we aren't aware of.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
that's something that we can do quickly. We can just drive around and figure out what streets that have speed limit signs and get that done. And then figure out how many signs we're gonna need for this do not even speed campaign.
He's coming back to March with that stuff.
Yeah, but he's gonna come back with a price, and I'm gonna come back with how many we need. We need to know how many is he
His price is
suggesting?
gonna include the,
Yeah, but is it 100 signs? Is it 500 signs? Is it 50 signs? Is it 20 signs?
he's gonna let us know how many entrances there are. That's where.
Oh, that's the only place we're gonna put them?
Yeah, that's what the whole point of it is. You put them at the entrances. That's how it was before.
It's everything that's needed. That's how I see it. I mean, the police is to tell us where to put it and which signs to consider.
Chris, not to interrupt your thought process, are you still kind of working through some of the things that you wanted to document?
No, the only other one I had left was, no, we hit generators. We're good.
Okay, very quickly, just the electronic access.
Yes.
You'd brought that up previously. Was there a timeline by which that we were looking to implement that? Or is it kind of longer term? I know we got a couple of things
Yep.
that we're kind of queuing up here with hurricane season, the generators and those things, that those seem a little bit more timely. We're already in February, but
Yep.
what, can you tell us more a little bit about the timeline for the electronic access?
The two answers to that question, the timeline for implementation, this is a very short project. I already have 2 quotes in. I'm waiting for a 3rd quote, so we can get it going very quickly. The timeline for when it's needed is as soon as possible. This is feeding into the accreditation process for the police department. This is also addressing potential risks with our current evidence situation.
Yeah.
So the sooner that we can address those, the better.
Okay, so we'll have a 3rd quote and that'll be coming to us soon.
I should have something at the March meeting.
All right, anyone else? That wouldn't-
Can I ask another question? I guess this is of Brad. When we look at this again, is it possible to remove things that we have no interest in and make this thing a more compact, easy to digest thing? I understand why everything's on here, but like, if you ask me about a public pool, I'd say never, or a splash pad or a water park. I think some of these things need to be taken off.
If they're,
It's very like cumbersome to look at something with so many lines of things that you're not gonna do.
if this group of commissioners decides this is something that never wants to happen, or that you never want to happen, we'll pull it off the list.
We could add it back, another commission could be elected in the fall and they could say, you
Correct.
know what, Chris, put a dinosaur putt park in.
Let me ask Alan,
Be put on.
some of those line items that Mac just identified, like the public pool. I'm imagining this came from the
Yeah, as you can see how many.
Right,
people
and
were there.
it came from
Yeah.
the survey.
Right, so
but-
maybe can we make them collapsible? So we're not getting rid of them because they appear here for a reason.
Yeah, and I
Right.
was going to suggest there's other opportunities of solution for, I mean, for me, I would not remove anything at the end of the day that reflects everything people wanted to see addressed. However, we
It doesn't
address
address
it.
everything that people wanted to see addressed. There's things in there that didn't make it onto here.
So for me, as whatever it's here, we need to address it. Whatever was said from the community, all those Excels, you made a summary here. And whatever it's here needs to be addressed. Whether it's the pool cannot happen in Biscayne Park and we make an agreement with the shores like Bay Harbor did, that's an opportunity to address it. So I think it's not taking away items, but looking into private, funding for certain things, looking for partnership for certain things, and answering to all of them.
But they're not in
How-
the capital project.
Well, how about?
Correct, but
Commissioner-
it's not, I wouldn't
Well,
completely
no, she's saying
remove
don't
it.
get rid of it. So how about we reorder everything
Yeah.
and take all the unfunded stuff, put it on the bottom
Put it in a different tab on the spreadsheet.
Jay,
or something.
I-
So it's not,
I think it makes sense. Both
clean
both
this
points
up.
make a lot of sense. To clean it up a little bit also, they're there for a
Right.
reason. So I'm saying make it
easier to
collapsible or
work
just-
with, easier to read, but we're not losing the information.
That's fine.
That's a compromise.
Awesome. There you go. Good work.
They're gone, but they're not really
All right,
gone.
Chris,
pull it
Chris, I'm content with what we've gotten done. Anything else that you need tonight?
You lose a lot of hair. I can already tell you're stressed.
No, 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 I can get this done this week. Tomorrow's Friday, right?
It's already Thursday.
I think the only thing that we need to discuss is your future services, number of hours, cost, those sorts of things. Because it sounds like we're going to be adding to what we originally discussed.
Well, if it's just one more meeting and it's during the commission, I'll come gratis. If it's going to extend beyond that, then we'll talk.
Okay.
All right.
There's a bowl of snacks behind you.
Trust me, I've already hit it.
All right, so then,
That's nice. A little send off music
Oh.
for everybody.
All right, so.
Ms. Dillon, put them on speaker. We'll have
so-
some fun.
Longer than what we had expected or hoped, but I think we did great work tonight. We moved it along and we're positioning ourselves for success at the next meeting.
So-
Mayor, any closing remarks from you?
May I ask a question before you close?
Yes,
Just
sir.
procedural?
Yeah.
Okay, so is the plan to have a resolution with the CIP attached as an exhibit for the March meeting? And then you're going to amend from there, or are we gonna have this as a discussion item from the March meeting? And then shoot for the April meeting to approve it?
My understanding from what I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we're going to have this as a discussion, or potentially as a discussion item in March and then pass it in April.
But
Okay.
to John, to your point, from a timing perspective, would it be better to have Brad prepare the resolution for us with this as an attachment, understanding we can amend it, and then it could come back in April, just ready to go?
Well, it would be, then you would be deferring it, so that there would be no point in doing that.
It's the
Same thing.
Yeah, I guess it's the
It's
same
just.
thing.
Yeah,
we just
the
need
resolution-
things on a resolution that we haven't approved.
Yeah, okay.
So I guess.
Brad, if we pass this as is in March,
Mhm.
add it as a resolution in March, it wouldn't be that difficult to make any changes in April, would it? That'd just be another resolution?
We'd have to have a resolution amending the CIP.
And you know that's gonna happen. If we approved it in March as is now, we know it's gonna change.
Yeah, that's
Chris,
just,
I
just
don't
another
know
Well,
route.
no, but I think what I'm hearing is that we've already gotten direction on some changes. We're gonna come back with an updated version for you. That's the one that we could also attach to a resolution
In March.
in March, and you could amend in April, as you see fit.
I'm not coming.
Well, what I was thinking is and again, I don't want to put more on Chris's plate than he already has. So Chris, please chime in if timing doesn't work.
What's that?
Well,
What you're cut out?
Oh, so Chris, tell me if timing wise, what I'm suggesting doesn't work. Because a lot of this is on you and Alan, 99% of it. I can draft a resolution and we can attach what you all create as a result of what we've talked about today and or tonight, and present that resolution to the commission in the March meeting. They can review it and do what they do, just like with any other resolution, if they want to amend any portion of the CIP, which is basically the spreadsheet is attached to the resolution. That's what they
Right.
approve. And then there's a second spreadsheet with the priority. And then they can tweak it however they want to tweak it and approve it as amended in March. And then there would be no reason to come back in April to amend it. If that doesn't work in the time frame for Alan and Chris, I get that. I'm just asking.
Well, I think this is going to be ultimately based on how much information we get to all of you, how comfortable you are with it, how much more you need. So we're going to work expeditiously to get you that information. You'll tell us what else you'll need. And then, we'll see how comfortable you are.
Well, but you can't do that. That would be pulling us outside of a meeting.
No, just to see how comfortable with it you are moving forward, not whether or not you're going to say yes or not or anything.
I want to see it and I want us to talk about it and make sure it's right before we say attach it to a resolution.
So let's do a discussion item then.
Yeah, that's what I'm comfortable. If you guys think otherwise, that's fine, but I'm not.
So
too big of a thing.
do you think that let's see, how long we got left in this particular month here?
2 weeks until the meeting.
Yeah. Do you think that all this information that we've asked you is going to be real? We're going to be able to get it by the March meeting?
We should be able to get a good chunk of it. The pieces that I'm not confident on are going to be the generator pricing.
Well, the generator is already in the budget. I mean, we've already outlined the cost for that, and we've kind of already said, okay, do it because it's a priority, right? Didn't we say that?
I thought that, yeah. I thought
Correct.
the number was a good
Then-
number.
No, wait, are you talking about that's what you said tonight?
Yeah.
Right, but what you're doing tonight is all discussion unofficial.
No, I get it.
Okay.
I get it. But he's saying he's got to come back with a price. I thought we already
I
had
thought we already had a price on the generator.
We have a pretty good guesstimate on the generator.
Oh, I thought that one was actually firmer than a guesstimate. Oh,
That's,
okay.
so that's based on the 8 most recent ones I've done.
Okay. So then
So the other one that I might not be able to get by the time, by March would be the dog park.
So,
I
so what,
think a
so,
discussion item.
okay, I agree with the discussion item. What happens with, I mean, this is going to continue to change. There might be delays because the vendor doesn't provide it. I mean, things are out of your control. So Brad, what happens once you make a resolution, you attach it, you approve it, the following changes as a living document, right? Because that's what you said at the end of the day. it's a
You
living
can amend the
document.
budget at any point
Right.
during the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So-
This is going to become part of your budget.
Correct. I'm
Right.
saying we're very concerned about making it for March, but it could be that it's April or it could be that it's May because things can be falling for any sort of circumstances beyond our control. I'm saying he can put all your effort. If the vendor doesn't answer, it goes to you all of a sudden, you start fresh. It might be another month. So procedurally, Brad, so once we approve a resolution and we attach it at any time following that, we need to make the changes to address if we're moving things along the months.
No, so if if you were to change your priorities and/or change or remove items from the CIP,
Okay.
you would have to do a resolution amending the
Which
CIP.
where we wouldn't be if we are all aligned to what we see and we approve at the
Agreed.
discussion, then
Right.
we'll move forward. It will just be moving along the dates. We're not removing, we're not adding at that stage, at least for this fiscal, and we're just moving along with the plan.
once
Right, so
we get it done, yeah. Then it's Chris's. Yeah.
I think discussion item that is.
Yeah,
And-
so anything this year that is not budgeted for, or that the budget has to change for any of these CIP items, that would just be a budget amendment.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, it goes without saying, but just for those that might not know, in the future, these conversations will happen as part of your budget process. And it won't be, okay. I'm just letting
We'll make budget process
rest of
so
the
much
world know
easier,
that.
I think.
Yes.
Yes.
This, Coming into the back end of the budget process that you all went through, this is the piece that was missing. This is why we've been having so many issues, because we didn't have this guiding document.
Got it.
Excuse me.
You ready? You're
Discussion.
done.
I'm ready.
So
Mayor?
We'll move it on as a discussion item.
Okay. All
The
right.
discussion.
Brad, thank you. Alan, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you guys so
Guys,
much.
Much.
Guys,
Okay.
Chris, one request. I think I heard you say at the last meeting, my first meeting, that you're kind of an Excel guru.
That depends on what you're gonna say next.
Well, I fancy myself one as well. I've put it down. Can we make this like a shared document on SharePoint so that maybe we can work on it together to, make sure that we have something that might be easier for folks? I don't know if it's easier is the right word, but it's just something that,
Brad, that may be a legally sticky issue, Brad.
Yeah, you got to be careful. So, I mean, you can share the document, but
No.
the commissioners can't share their thoughts.
Yeah, you can't
on
make it
that.
a
So in
shared
other words,
file
if it's a
because-
group document, you all couldn't make additions and comments and see what everybody did. That would
Just-
be a sunshine law
right,
violation.
no, just the architecture of the file, like maybe like how things are highlighted, and there's some tricks you can use to group things, like, moving things around so that it comes in some, I don't know, just.
You guys can do it. He can't share it with all of us because if we got in there and did things and saw what each other did, that would be a problem. Chris, may I have it in an Excel format? Because I would like, it's easier for me to make my notes on it, directly on it, and play with stuff. And I add columns with my notes and questions and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, the next step is once Alan and I have a chance to chat and put all this together, we'll get that draft out to you. I don't want to send anything out as it is right now.
Understood. But can I get it in Excel instead of a PDF?
Yeah, it's the same way that I've sent this out to you previously. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
David's raising his hand. Do you have a question?
No, as far as I know, the bidding was ending, like I said, on the 22nd. I'll have to double check on that.